One. We are here for Attwood Unleashed 58. Welcome. This is a 4-hour live stream every Wednesday night with my co-host, the extremely handsome Andrew Gold.
Whoop, whoop. I was just telling Sean how handsome he is off air, and now he's thrown it back at me.
Handsome until you see his hairy back.
It looks like, what, are you getting a picture up from somewhere? Clicking around.
I'm saving that one to hold it over you in case everything goes wrong.
I just got a photo of Sean's bath. Go on, everyone. Go on.
All right, so tonight we have the usual eclectic mix of guests as arranged by Ash, which will be commencing at 6 o'clock. And we're going to give you the rundown of the guests momentarily and get into some of the top news stories of the week before the guests come in. Huge shout out to Amy in Alabama, whose birthday it is tomorrow. So I hope she has a good birthday and eats her vittles and grits and gets on with... Can you do the vittles and grits Amy in Alabama accent, Andrew?
What is viddles and grits?
I'm Amy in Alabama. Like, have you ever watched the Beverly Hillbillies?
I'm saying here, Granny Moses, her Christmas vittles recipe. That's what's popping up on Google. Oh my word, Sean. These are old references.
So welcome wherever you are in the world. And our first guest this evening is going to be one of the most requested. And he's brought on his co-host from his new podcast series, The Mars Chronicles. We are talking David Whitehead and Josh Reid. They will be asking whether there was an advanced civilization that once existed on Mars. Is there a connection between Mars, the story of Atlantis, and possibly even humanity's origins? And does Mars hold evidence of ancient cataclysm in our solar system that may explain numerous cataclysmic references in Earth's mythological and geological records? I'll hand the next guest intro over to you, Andrew.
Well, it's only because it'll be Mr. Steeples, independent journalist, and I've got this orange thing. I think it's for him, isn't it? That's what you were saying, anyway. We're all orange for him because he likes to wear orange and all that. I think, unless this is all a joke at my expense and actually he hates orange. He's an independent journalist, editor-in-chief of the Steeple Times. Everybody knows him on this channel because he's always popping on. He'll be stopping by to give us his thoughts on the Netflix documentary Jimmy Savile, A True British Horror Story, as well as our very own documentary. Sean's on this fantastic channel about the UK's most prolific sex offender, which Matthew also featured in as a talking head about that very subject.
Yeah, and to everybody who's been supporting and sharing and liking our Savile documentary Untouchable, it's got well over 100k views in a week, so massive thank you for everyone for spreading the word on that one. And if you've not seen it yet, it is on YouTube presently. It's had a few edits, the YouTube version, but you can check it out. And the guest after Steeples is coming on with Andrew, and that is Norman Baker.
Bakey boy. The Batemeister General, as I like to call him, political commentator Norman Baker, on next, giving his take on the potential of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry doing a second Oprah interview. I mean, the first one was just unbearable, but they might do another one. What will that mean for their already fraught relationship with the monarchy? Other topics Norman will be discussing include the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Tour. I think that's her 300th year on the throne. And what that means for the taxpayer. Harry's relationship with Prince Charles will be going on about as well, and much, much more. It's going to be really, really interesting. Norman Baker's really good. Good little comment there from Tommy DePorter about Untouchable. Shocking but brilliant. It's quite a few hours. A lot of people have been getting in touch with me saying, well done. I didn't have anything to do with it. But people really, really enjoyed it, apparently, Sean.
Yeah, it's the version that's on YouTube, I think, is 3 hours, 40 minutes long. And the structure that was put together by James, phenomenal, compelling. I didn't realise how powerful that structure was until I watched the premiere myself last week. And people are saying, it is really long, but we just can't stop watching it. So thank you, everyone, for getting on board with Untouchable. So at 8 o'clock, we're going to be switching over to Patreon. If you'd like to watch the exclusive Patreon content, we do cover subjects that we can't talk about on YouTube. there is a small stipend, a monthly stipend to watch the Patreon content. Link is in the description box below the video, and it's thank you to the patrons that stipend adds up over a number of people to enable us to keep producing this great content. And the first guest coming on at 8:10 is someone I've wanted to have on for ages, actually, because I've been watching his stuff. And he's a former prisoner, JC. His YouTube channel is From Wrong to Strong, and he has built a career as a YouTuber after getting released from prison in Mexico. And from, having operations in Mexico, wild man, wild woman going in Mexican prison. One of my smugglers ended up in Mexican prison. I know my smuggler got stabbed quite fast. It is a unique situation. I've spoken to quite a few people about Mexican prison stories, and it is it's a lot different down there, and you get to hear about that. All right, so then the next guest is Chris Todd, who allegedly was a mafia murderer accomplice with O.J. Simpson. Chris met the stars, went to the parties. He's got the pictures to prove it tonight. He's going to be delving into the murky world of the former NFL star O.J. Simpson and what might have really happened on that fateful night. And then I'll let you introduce the next.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. That. Our next guest is, by the way, it's pronounced stipend, isn't it?
Stipend.
Yeah. Speaking of pronunciations, our next guest is chaplain, author, and show host. Do you want to do the honours, Sean?
Jesse Zebedar.
Jesse Zebota, or Zabota. Jesse Zabota has worked with United States veterans in hospitals, hospices, and community settings for more than 10 years. She now has her own ministry called Illuminate the Darkness and speaks weekly on 5 channels on YouTube and other media platforms. You can listen to Jesse's shows on The Reveal Report, Aquarius Rising South Africa, David Zublik and Carmen Studer and Right On Radio. On tonight's show, Jesse will be discussing the Luciferian Brotherhood and its structure, the occult in government and military position, the Masons, crimes against children hidden in our institutions, such as human transporting is the word we're going with to not get kicked off YouTube, abuse and cannibalism. Bloody hell.
Good grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Sign up to Patreon for that one. That is Jesse Sabota.
The guest after that is equally macabre, Andrew.
For the first time on the show, we will be delving into chaos magic. Our guest is Jason Luov, the best-selling author of 8 books. His latest is the widely acclaimed and unstoppably successful John Dee and the Empire of Angels, a massive chronicle of Western civilization's obsession with the apocalypse. For the last 20 years, Jason has dedicated himself to exploring, reporting on, and teaching the world's sacred traditions, from indigenous shamanism to the Enlightenment traditions of India and Tibet, and Western magic and occultism. And it's magic with a K at the end, so that makes it even magicier, doesn't it? So that's going to be interesting.
So that's the full lineup for this evening. First 2 hours on YouTube, second 2 hours on Patreon. Patreon link is in the description box below this video if you're watching it on YouTube. And huge shout out and thank you to wherever you're watching it. Facebook, Twitter. We're going to go over to, let's probably squeeze 1 or 2 news stories in before the first guest comes on. And Meghan Markle has had to remove all references to her doomed Netflix animation show Pearl from the Archwell website after the woke production was axed by Netflix. So, that Pearl was the title for the Markle-created show, which was officially cancelled last week as part of a wave of cutbacks promoted by Netflix's drop in subscribers. And they're blaming a lot of these woke shows now being unrealistic, going too far, and causing this viewer drop and subscription drop at Netflix. So a description of the series under the Archwell Productions subsection was nowhere to be found on the website. A quote, like many girls her age, our heroine Pearl is on a journey of self-discovery as she tries to overcome life's daily challenges. A quote read, which has now been removed. The quietly deleted references come a week after Netflix announced the cancellation of the show, which add Meghan as an executive producer. What do you think about all this woke stuff going too far then, Andrew?
Does my head in, really. And it doesn't have to be woke. I think it's got just any ideology where super rich elite people lecture the rest of us. I'm not interested. And it's not just Meghan, who's just done nothing in her life except married someone who's also done nothing in his life, but it's also executive.
Andrew's on fire tonight, hitting them hard.
Kick it off. I'm tired of sitting on the fence. I'm not sitting on the fence anymore. Not on this show. It's executive produced by David Furnish, who you may know as the partner of Elton John. And I just think, firstly, look, I don't expect them to just sit on their bottoms and do nothing. They've got to live their lives. They've got ambitions, and that they want to do things as well. But there are plenty of people who are cartoon makers, cartoon writers, and animators who are desperate for work right now. They don't want those very few spaces taken up by Elton John's husband and Prince Harry's wife, who might have some indistinguishable talent for cartoon making, but I very much doubt it. And as for the woke stuff, I really like what Ricky Gervais, when he got up at the Golden Globes and he just said, like, come up, get your award and thank your God and F off, because the rest of us, we don't want to hear you lecture the rest of us. You'd all work for ISIS if you could. So done with them. I'm done with them, and I don't want to see Meghan's woke thing. And it does annoy me because, TV, I'm a TV maker myself, and it was supposed to be about good TV and good films, and it's an art form in itself, and it's become about activism. It's become about telling everyone how they should behave, and the whole point is we're supposed to all behave differently. We all have different ways that we think the world should work. We have different ideologies. We don't want one huge big corporation with all the money in the world lecturing us about woke values and stuff. Just naff off. So that's what I think. What do you think, mate?
Yeah. I'm speechless, man. I'm in the middle of retitling tonight's episode Andrew Unleashed.
Unleash me.
I could see Matthew Steeples in the waiting room. I don't know if he's just testing his tech, but Matthew, if you're listening, you're scheduled to come on at 7 p.m. So if you're testing your tech, that's fine. Otherwise, we're gonna bring you in at 7 p.m. because we've got David Whitehead coming in next. I'll try and squeeze a few more minutes out of this story then. So the original announcement that Meghan was on the website. I'm thrilled that Archwell Productions partnered with the powerhouse platform of Netflix, and these incredible producers will together bring you this new animated series which celebrates extraordinary women throughout history.
Well, what's she done that's extraordinary as a woman?
She didn't Google the royal family. That's quite extraordinary. Who has not?
What has she done, though? And I'm also annoyed. I'm offended on behalf of cartoon makers, but I'm also offended as a podcaster because they got some huge deal from Spotify to make podcasts. They haven't even followed through. They made one episode, which was them announcing they were going to make episodes, and it's been about 8 months. You and I do. How many people do we each interview each week on your and my other podcast? We're sitting there working our bottoms off, and we're not. We don't have a grandpa who sits on a golden throne, as Prince Charles was doing this week, lecturing us about poverty. He couldn't make it up.
And what kind of stipend was she getting for just sitting on her ass and not? Did she get some mad half $500 million payment or something? Didn't the both of them for a podcast that they did an hour of? Over the years.
Do some work, Meghan and Harry. Do some real life grafting. Try and make it on your own. I'd have so much respect if they could find a way to change their identity so no one recognises them and go out and get a job. Otherwise, I don't want to hear from them ever.
Pearl was set to see a young girl inspired by Meghan, whose name means pearl in Welsh, take on various social injustices while highlighting the work of feminist icons.
Well, feminist icons will be, shaking in their graves right now. The idea of Meghan, a woman who married a king and just sat there doing nothing. The feminist icons did some amazing things over the last 100 years. The suffragettes, incredible. Some of them put their lives on the line. There was that woman who got hit by a horse, I think, or something like that. Not that my history is not great, but I know they did a lot of stuff that she's not bothered doing. So I'm not having it.
The streaming giant shelled out $100 million in the deal with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in September 2020.
Well, I imagine they've given all that money to social injustice then, have they? Because it's a lot of money, by the way. That's a lot of money. 100 million, they could give everybody watching this, about $1 million.
A year,
More,
almost 2 years later, the Duke and Duchess are yet to produce any published content for Netflix.
This is a joke.
100 million for Scotch Mist. Oh, wow.
Is Scotch Mist to you? Does that mean nothing?
Yeah.
I never heard that. I like that.
Yeah.
I learn a lot on this show. It is absolutely mad. The whole thing's mad. I'm not having it, and I'm not doing it anymore. The king and queen, they get rid. Done.
No wonder Netflix share prices nosedive from almost 700 to 350. It is slashed in half, pissing money in the wind at the royals. That's what they get. Yeah. Right, I can hear beeps indicating that our two guests are about to come on for the first section.
I'm out of it, mate. Enjoy yourself. Have a lovely time, and I'll be back in an hour.
Adios, my friend.
Ba 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 ba.
All right, so if you are watching, as we announced earlier, if you've just jumped on the stream, we have now got the first section. David Whitehead and Josh Reid, they've released a new podcast series, The Mars Chronicles. And was there an advanced civilization existed on Mars? A connection between Mars, Atlantis, humanity's origins. Does Mars hold evidence of ancient cataclysm in our solar system that may explain numerous cataclysmic references in Earth's mythological and geological records? So we're going to have these guys on for an hour right now. It is a real honor. Whenever David comes on, my mind is just absorbing all the information. And everyone's saying, get David on for longer. And it's a real honor that he's brought Josh on as well. So let's bring him through now. Here we go. Hey, Josh, how's it going? David?
It's good, Sean. How are you doing?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Really pumped to have you guys back, David, with Josh. The viewers have been going mad, asking us to get deeper into this Mars stuff since we had you on the other week. So, firstly then, are you guys okay to just say a little bit about the project? How it came about, what got your interest in this?
David?
Sure. Well, it actually happened spontaneously on another show that Josh and I were doing where we were talking about ancient serpent cults. And it was sort of a long podcast. We were having a good time. And then Josh dropped some stuff about Mars just out of the blue. And I was like, oh my God, we can't get into that now because we're going to end this show. That means we have to do another show on this. And that other show turned into a whole series that we're just going to see how long it goes. We've got guests booked. We just had Mike Barra on the show. Josh and I did some presentations, just throwing out different theories and ideas on the subject. And yeah, it's just one of those spontaneous things that it's been pretty exciting so far to dig up this research that both Josh and I have been looking into for quite some time.
Yeah.
So Josh, how did you guys click up and become this powerhouse Martian team?
Well, David, I have known about David for a long time. He's a co-host on the Enslaved podcast with Michael Tessarian, which Michael Tessarian is one of the hearts of my research for almost 2.5 decades. I started researching this stuff a long, long time ago, back in the 1990s, and first came upon Michael Tessarian, David Icke, all these guys. So I knew about David, and he had reached out to me because we were doing some information on the Q stuff back in 2017, 2018, which I would probably be, I guess, considered one of the subject matter experts on the topic. And we came on his show, and that topic really didn't go about Q. It really went towards the occult and the esoteric mysteries, which have been the front of what I've been looking into for 2.5 decades. And so me and David came together like that. We've been doing shows occasionally ever since, and we just decided to do this series, which is fantastic because it's not only about Mars. It's Earth, it's the moon, it's Mars, it's the universe, it's the galaxy. It's questioning this evidence of ancient civilizations on Earth, these remnants on Mars and on the moon, and saying, is this real or is this not real? And then we actually add a lot of the occult sciences into this and the esoteric mysteries into it that kind of maybe coordinate that this was actually ancient civilizations or even something more modern.
So David and Josh's links will be in the description box below this video if you want to go over and support their work, their socials, and watch the series. but we're going to get into some of it now. So what actual evidence, what's the most compelling evidence that there was advanced civilization on Mars?
Well, there's so many places to start. I mean, I started looking into the subject of Mars back in the Richard Hoagland days. Everybody remembers Richard Hoagland. He's still kicking around. He's doing his own show still, which I'm glad to hear. And he was a science writer for Walter Cronkite, and he was right there at ground zero for all the lunar missions and everything. And then he basically stumbled. He was totally against any kind of conspiracy when it came to NASA. But when he started to get in the inner workings and see what was going on, he actually realized, oh my God, it's quite a lot of these different things that they're hiding. He never went to the point of saying, which a lot of people I think that come in now are saying, which is that NASA lied about 100% of every single thing they've ever shown us. He didn't go there. I don't go there either. There's many reasons for that. But so he started digging up these photographs collected from various missions that were conducted by NASA, as well as other space agencies. And he wrote the book Dark Mission and brought out a lot of those, basically the mathematics, the geometry of a lot of these structures that are photographed on both the moon and Mars, which oddly enough resemble the geometry of, and even some of the actual shapes like pyramids, etc., of ancient structures on this planet, ancient Cyclopean ruins. That are still in debate today, and we're mostly left with not really a satisfying explanation, to my mind at least. So when I looked at his work on it, that's what got me curious. And then you start going down the rabbit hole, Sean. You start listening to different varieties of opinions on the matter. There's different whistleblowers. So you start with, if I started with the ancient myths and legends, which this is what we do on Unslaved with Michael Tessarian, is we go into these ancient myths and legends, and Josh is very well versed in these things as well. And that's where I started, was like, okay, what do the ancient peoples say about Earth history and some of the cataclysms or possible visitation by other beings, etc. And it's ubiquitous. It's universal. It's all across the world. Every ancient culture talks about advanced beings either living on Earth prior to the advent of Human 2.0 or were visiting Earth from other worlds. This was ubiquitous. There's different fairy tales about it, but it's all the same thing. So that's where I started. I went, okay, maybe these aren't just a bunch of campfire tales that scientists and geologists and historians like to throw out. Maybe there's something to it that was told through mythological language, right? Which makes sense. Then the next phase was Richard Hoagland's work, bringing out all these photographs, these anomalous photographs. I know everybody's got their thing. Some guys are like, oh, no, it's all just light and shadow and whatever. But you really dive into it, and the deeper you go in, you start to see that a lot of these anomalous structures just don't fit they don't fit the perspective that this is all just random Earth or planetary geology or rocks or mountains. So that's where I started. And then, there's so many other elements, and that's why we need this series to kind of flesh it all out, hear all the perspectives. Not every perspective we're going to bring on is where everybody's going to agree. That's not what this is about. This is about Josh and I dumping all this research on the table and then saying to the audience, what do you think? Is there mysteries in our solar system that actually explain mysteries on our planet and maybe even our origins? I think there are, but we let the audience decide.
Yep.
So, Josh, what's the most compelling evidence you've come across of advanced civilizations?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, on Earth, on Moon, or the Mars. On Mars, I remember watching Buzz Aldrin, and he was doing an interview, and he goes, "We need to go to Mars. Have you seen this? There's a monolith on the moon of Phobos. We need to go check that out and look at that." And to me, I was like, "Wait a minute. What did he just say?" And so, I had read Dark Mission during this time, and I understood the hyperdimensional physics that Richard Hoagland talks about. I had understood that he's looking at various types of land spots, geographical spots on Mars that had 90-degree angles. God doesn't make 90-degree angles. It doesn't happen naturally in formation. We know that the universe has a certain creative principle to it, but it doesn't go out and start creating these geographical 90-degree angles, as well as certain types of numbers that are repeated throughout these different types of structures that you'd see on Mars, 19.5 being one of them, and these other numbers, right? The phi ratio and so forth. Phi ratio. These types of numbers are found on Mars between structures. And when you start seeing that is not a representation of God's natural creative ability, but in the sense of some type of intelligence design, as well as Mars is considered a dead planet. Now, if we look through our solar system at all the planets, you don't see any dead planets. Every planet is incredibly active. And so it doesn't really make sense that Mars is a dead planet unless something happened, some type of cataclysmic event. And this was like kind of where I started the research. I wasn't even looking for Mars. And I came across Michael Tessarian actually talking about the destruction of Tiamat. And Tiamat is this mythological story from the Enuma Elish, where Tiamat is this goddess who is destroyed by another god known as Marduk. Marduk is the son of Enki, and the ruler of Babylon during this time. And basically what happens is there's this, and you kind of read the Enuma Elish, and it talks about this long progressive war that goes about, and how Tiamat is battling these bad guys, Marduk and all of them, because they killed Absu. And at the end of it, it looks like that Tiamat wages a final battle, right? And this is the dragon in the sky, wages a final battle and is finally destroyed by Marduk, who splits her in half. And, you know, Michael Tessarian comes about this, and there's multiple points of research pertaining to why he believes this, is that there was once a planet that existed between Mars and Jupiter, a massive water planet, and it was somehow destroyed either through war or cataclysm. And then this planet basically broke apart, created water comets that basically smashed into the other comets, and this created a lot of the cataclysms that we potentially saw in the Lower Dryas period. Now, this also pertains to a lot to what Velikovsky said, right? Worlds in collision with a big comet flying by Earth and basically causing upheavals and cataclysmic events, causing a big flood, these types of things. And so one of the things that we look at is, what were these stories literal? Or not literal, but kind of like contextual in the sense of telling the story of something that happened 1 million years ago, 500,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago in the history of Earth. And I think it's safe to say that there is some relevance to this. Now, we were actually talking to Mike Barra last weekend, and so this has been my theory, is that Tiamat was Mars, or Mars was a moon to Tiamat. Mike Barra comes out and goes, no, I think Mars was a moon to another planet that existed there, and it was destroyed, and this is why it's all, and I'm like, there it is, right there.
It was kind of funny, Josh, that you kind of started, it was episode 1, you threw that out, was like,
Yeah.
oh, I think it was, and then we kind of went through, and I forgot that you brought that forward. And then Barra comes out and he's like, yeah, I think Mars is a moon of a bigger planet, and that the whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, Josh, did you hear what he just said? And Josh is like, dude, episode 1. I'm like, oh my God, you said the same thing. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. But go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
No, keep going.
Oh, yeah. Well, so when we start looking at a lot of this in the sense of mythological history, we start seeing that they're trying to tell us a story. So one of the things that I've been really, really deep investigation, as well as David, is kind of like what I call investigative symbology, investigative mythology, and really just looking at these stories and trying to find contextual relevance. Now, one of the things that I've noticed throughout the years is that when you start looking at the various different cultures, I mean, you're talking about a 4,000, 5,000 year gap between all these mythological stories that all come about. But you start seeing these parallels between these gods and these goddesses. And what we discovered, there's about 12 to 15 different gods or goddesses that have various attributes that are just repeated in different cultures. And what they do is they repeat these, they'll take a god and goddess, and they'll adopt it, and they'll add cultural attributes to it. So they'll add their various flavors, if you want, to it, as well as an astrotheological context to that god in the sense of the anthropomorphication of what it is. But if you get down to the heart of these different gods and goddesses that they're actually talking about, all they are basically representations of stories of something that happened in the past. And you got to remember, in Greek literature, everything ends with cataclysm, everything ends in disaster. And you got to ask yourself, was there something in Earth's history? Now, myself, I've always felt that there was something bigger, like humanity has amnesia or something, that there's something wrong with the world. There's something missing. There's something off. Our history, we've been lied to about our history. And I know everybody out there feels the same way. I was in the military, Sean, and I was getting out. and I had to go get an eye appointment to the eye doctor. And it was a really sunny day in Washington D.C., and the sun was beating down, and I'm like squinting, I couldn't see anything. And I'm like, see a bird fly by, and I see a dog walk by, and they're not squinting at the sun. And I go, how many animals on this planet have adapted evolutionary to the sun? Every single one of them. Every single one of them. No animals squint to the sun. Our skin burns in the sun. And so I go in there and I'm talking to the doctor, and I said, hey, I got to ask you a question. I said, do you believe in evolution? She's like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, okay, great. Tell me how man evolved on this planet to not adapt their eyes to the sun as well as their skin to the sun. And she goes, well, probably because we invented hats. And I said, well, no, that came along way after. She goes, well, you know, the modern theory is that we grew up in very, very dark, rigid forests. I said, okay. So I go home and I start looking at different types of animal life in rigid forests. And guess what? They've all adapted to the radiation of the sun on this planet, except for humanity. So I started realizing that we came from somewhere probably a little bit colder with less solar radiation. And if we know Mars, if Mars had an atmosphere, there would be less solar radiation. It would be a lot dimmer, and our sun would be more absorbent, or the sun would be more conducive to our body type. So I truly believe that we evolved on a different planet than Earth, and that we somehow got to Earth.
So there's a long chain of DNA that's spread throughout. David, earlier on, you said there was a commonality between the stories of ancient civilizations, the same theme. What is the most ancient civilization that has documented that theme that you've come across?
Well, they often refer to like the Egyptians or the Sumerians, right? The Sumerian texts. But in my work with Michael Tessarian and other researchers from the Western world, they would talk also about the Bok people. You know, we did a whole series called the Bok Saga, which if that ends up being dated correctly and ends up being true, that would predate those civilizations. There's connections between Egypt and Ireland that a lot of people are not aware of, which would also indicate that maybe some of the high culture that was in Egypt was also influenced by people from the West as well, and vice versa, people from the East going to the West. We see, you've got like Meritaten, princess, daughter of Akhenaten, buried in County Kerry, Ireland. Why is that? Why are there red-haired mummies with Druidic bardic, jewelry and regalia and ceremony buried in Egypt? So there's connections that are there that you start bringing in a whole other chapter of history. So to nail it down, we also have to talk about the missing chapters of history. This is where you get into the Atlantean theory and all of that, and there are many other words for Atlantis, by the way, that you'll find throughout various ancient cultures. Whether you're going into ancient India or even in some of the Asian continents or the Western continents, you're going to find these references to lost technology, lost high civilization. They weren't writing about a time where the caveman ruled the planet the way science does. They wrote about a time of high culture, high technology, and then something happened, and then you start getting into the underground world of things where you find all of these cities and all these different places that are built into the earth, like in Derinkuyu, Turkey, etc. We spoke about that last time. So the most ancient to me would be where we're trying to get as much information we can about the missing chapters of history that come before, or they would come post-Diluvian, right, or post-Cataclysm. And then the debate is, what was the Cataclysm? Are the myths true? When you get into the Ramayana and the Puranas, and when they talk about the battle of the gods, or is that a mythological story talking about cometary destruction on the planet that was then anthropomorphized into these characters? I kind of think it's a bit of both if you look at it all. But when you take from all of these, this is where it gets fun. It's not pinning down one culture and saying, oh, they've nailed it, the whole thing. When you take the stories from the Bok people and the Sumerians and the Egyptians and even the Greeks and the later groups, and then the ancient India and the text coming out of there, like there was I'm trying to remember his name. I've got some notes on this, where there was an Indian scholar. He was a Sanskrit scholar. And he wrote the fact that he's like, after studying the Indian ancient tradition for as long as I have, I've concluded that our history is loaded with references talking about ancient advanced civilizations and off-world beings coming to influence the history of Earth. And so, there's so many of these references. When you put it all together and you see patterns, they might name the god something different, or they might name the character different, or they might have a different story around the same central theme. But just look at all the stories they're telling you, like the Marvel Avengers series or any of these pop culture movies. It's all the same myths and legends coming from these ancient times, just recast with Thor and the Hulk and Superman and Batman or whatever. But it's all the same stories. So my question is, who were the gods? What is this obsession that humanity has for living on its knees, worshiping otherworldly beings that have some kind of an advantage over humanity, or that we believe that progenitors of humanity come from the sky? What is with that? We talk about heaven, we go, oh, heaven, it's up there, and hell is down there. Like, that's just the basic logic you get from people. But you go, well, what does that word heaven mean? You get into the etymology. What did they mean when they said heaven? What did they mean when they said gods? What are these references in the Bible even about? Because the Bible's meant to be based on a monotheistic ideology of religion, but yet you find out it's henotheistic. It was a selection out of other gods that were believed in at the time. And they talk about the Elohim, which is a plural term in the ancient Hebrew. Who are the Elohim? What is the creator God coming down and saying, let us make man in our image? If he's the God, why is he saying us and our when you get into these terms? And you just get into this stuff and you find it in all these different cultures and religions, and you go, maybe they're all telling us the same damn story. It's just with different coloring and different characters, just like we do with movies. We keep telling Batman, how many Batmans are there now? For crying out loud, the guy in Twilight is the new Batman. Like, we've had so many Batman, but what's so important about the story? Why does it keep interesting people? Why does it keep selling out? Why is Star Wars and Star Trek and these shows and Marvel, why does that ping all of us to a point where they're blockbuster films? Well, I think it's because there's a layer of truth to it all. It's just told in a mythological way as the ancient stories were. So sort of a lot there, but that's kind of my best shot at that.
Well, before we go to this question that the viewers sent in, then, so does this relate to Jungian archetypes?
Oh, yeah, I could say a lot on that. I mean, the Jungian archetype, some people might look at Jung's theory and say, well, none of it's real, Dave. It's all archetypes. Like, it's all projection. It's all psychological projection. But Jung was so good at talking about these other dimensions. And he was also talking basically the dimension of the psyche, right? About how we view. It's because the psyche is our lens of viewing reality. We don't actually see through just our eyes. We see through our brain. So when you bring that in, you go, oh, psychology really does play a part here. So getting into those archetypes, my thing is, maybe those archetypes were a product of two things. They were a product of us dealing with ancient traumas and the need to tell stories and communicate and express ourselves, etc. And then we have these different layers of archetypes within our psyche. But then maybe a lot of those stories and archetypes were built upon an actual literal foundation of real experiences that were possibly had by ancient cultures, that they came later, right? Like, one way I look at it is, the movie Star Trek, the new movies. I think it's the first or second one where they're going over, and they did this in the show too, but they're flying over this primitive planet where the people there are still, living out in the wilderness, and they look up and they see the Starship Enterprise come over, and they start worshiping it as a god. And that scene made me think about even the fact that in places like Papua New Guinea and many other places, there are still tribal cultures there that haven't really embedded into modern civilization that worship aircraft that fly over and do airdrops and things like that. And they have it's like a whole religion based on worshiping aircraft. Well, just a basic chain of logic could tell you that if mankind in that ancient time was, they didn't have IMAX, they didn't have television, they didn't have the internet, they had another way of viewing, they were much more integrated with nature. They would have viewed anything out of the norm as being otherworldly or God, the world of the gods affecting the world of man. But does that mean that is the literal truth of what they were saying? That there was literally a god named Thor, or literally a god named this, or a goddess named that? Or was that all a combination of man interpreting real world events with those archetypes of the psyche, which is probably how they even got there, and then they told the story, and that's why it looks the way it does. And that's also, if that's true, that's why we can't just throw all these myths, legends, and scriptures out. We have to actually look at them and say, maybe they're trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
It's a transmission of knowledge, definitely. So Heli as I'm going to butcher this, aren't I? This pronouncing. What about the Göbekli Tepe?
Göbekli Tepe. There you
Göbekli
go.
Tepe, Turkey,
Turkey?
12,000-year-old temple ruins.
Yeah.
Josh,
So-
you take this one.
Yeah, this was discovered a while back, and before this point in time, archaeologists, thought that civilization started 5,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent Valley, right? And then Göbekli Tepe comes about, and they start uncovering this vast city that was hidden under dirt, and they start finding various artifacts. They start dating it around 12,000 years. I would say that it's probably much, much older, that it was probably buried about 12,000 years ago, and something buried it. They think that it was intentionally buried. But this gives rise to these same things that we're talking about now. Go to the Sphinx and how they've water erosion dated the Sphinx to, what is it, 12,500 years, 10,500 to 12,500 years ago, around the same time as Göbekli Tepe. And so we start seeing the same type of architecture, the same type of symbology spread throughout the entire world in the sense of ancient ruins that are now destroyed. They just discovered this yellow brick road they believe to be the road to Atlantis underneath the ocean. You got various different types of things being discovered around the ocean, from pyramids off of the coast of Florida to off the coast of Japan to everywhere else on this planet, in the sense that something happened that caused rising ocean waters to basically overtake old coastal lands and then bury, produce maybe a mud flood or some type of great flood, which if you have a flood and a lot of water coming into land, you're going to have a lot of dirt that's kicked up, and that dirt can easily bury old cities and buildings and these types of things. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing. And with Göbekli Tepe, another point of this is they haven't uncovered all the city yet. They've only uncovered a certain part of it, and they don't want to. Archaeologists don't want to go back in and dig up more of the city because they're afraid of what they're going to find. And what I think they'll find is there is a highly advanced civilization on this planet a long, long time ago that was more spiritually inclined and technologically advanced than we actually are today, but in a completely different perspective. It wasn't about computers and cell phones, but they had some type of other technology that was, I believe, kind of more biological in nature. And to David's point here, he was talking about Hollywood a minute ago. Have you ever noticed with all these Hollywood movies, the Marvel and the DC, it's all about saving Earth. Every single time, it's about saving Earth. Why are the gods the saviors of Earth? And you have to wonder, it's other gods that are trying to destroy Earth and these other gods that are saving Earth. And then also you mentioned the Jungian archetypes. Did you ever notice that there's 12 of them? Interesting point, isn't it?
Do you want to run them down?
Well, there's 12 of them. But here's the thing: is one of my points of investigation was in the Solomon's Temple, and this was a topic that fascinated me. And I started researching this, and I realized that when you get back Joshin and Boaz, the two cherubims that guard the door of Solomon's Temple, is that you go into the 12 houses of bread, and you have to navigate the 12 houses of bread before you can get to the Holy of the Holies, the Ark of the Covenant. And I started realizing that this was a larger interpretation of something. And during this time in my Hermetic voyage, my Rosicrucian voyage, right, I started to realize that a lot of what they were talking about was various aspects of the mind. And so I started looking at the zodiac. There's 12 constellations in the zodiac. There's 12 disciples of Jesus. And I started to realize that what we're actually talking about is the inner zodiac. The tarot, if you want to call it that. And this is what Carl Jung was actually talking about, is these zodiacal symbols, the tarot, astrology, all these things. They're not pertaining to the movement of the stars in the heavens out here, but instead of the movement of the stars in heavens in relation to your internal configuration of who and what you are. And that humanity, in our spiritual sense, is we have 12 various archetypes of mind that we go through. And we're born into this world with a certain configuration of these archetypes. And it's our job, it's our journey through our spiritual progression towards that learning of who the self is to actually navigate all 12 of these archetypes and master them to a certain level and degree. And this is where the arising of the 13th archetype comes about. And this is kind of what Jesus would represent in Christianity. you have the 12 disciples, and then you have Jesus, and then you have the Holy of Holies at the end of the houses of bread. And this is the contract with God. This is the containment of God, of where God exists. And I believe that this is what they were talking about in the ancient writings, the esoteric mysteries, in finding the self. The self is the first part of finding and understanding what God truly was. And I'm not talking about some God that sits in the freaking clouds and shoots lightning bolts when you're bad. I'm talking about a non-partial God, a God that does not interfere with the creation, except puts about a set of rules and laws in the universe, which we abide by, called natural law. And this is how the progression of evolution of consciousness comes about, is through the progression of those laws. And that we have an impartial God, a creator, I call totality or absolutism, that basically, because I'm watching a lot of the comments, that created it all. And really didn't create it all. It's just always existed. And there's no logic to it, because there can't be. But anyways, I wanted to touch on the union part as well, the Carl Jung thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is definitely one of the most fascinating interviews we've had on the channel, and it's not just the knowledge, which is phenomenal, but also you guys' energy, your enthusiasm and passion for it. Before we go over to Atlantis then, David, perhaps could you just, you mentioned earlier, was it the Bach or the Bok people? Who are they? Where in the world were they?
Well, the Bach people would have been, I guess, they would have been where Europe, like Scandinavia, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the ancient peoples, basically the progenitors of the Druidic cultures that was wiped out by the Vatican under, these different Roman emperors and whatnot, and the whole British Empire at that time, because that was a competing group. Those were competing groups and bloodlines and families that would have basically left the Roman Empire irrelevant, in terms of their spiritual knowledge and all of that. And so they had to destroy them. And in fact, the Vatican is built on top of a Mithraic temple. That Mithraic temple is built on top of ancient Druidic Bach temples. So they would be the ancient lineage peoples to that. And what would it be? It would be the northern. I'm trying to think of the right word for this. There's an ancient legend that comes out of there. It's been a while since I've covered that subject. We did a bunch of interviews on it. But there was the, what do they call it? It'll come to me. There's sort of
an
the
Etruscan mysteries?
No, it's like where they came from, like the Arctic homeland. The idea of the Arctic homeland, that there was the Arctic homeland before whatever happened to the Arctic, what froze over top of it. There was the idea there was a vast civilization that was there. They're finding rainforest buried under the ice, etc. So the idea was, were the Bach peoples connected, or were they those peoples that were inhabiting those lands, and were some of those Western peoples, did they migrate after the Cataclysm and then populate other areas? Mm-hmm. And this is where you get the story of the High Arya, which the Arya weren't like just one race. They were a caste of people that had this ancient knowledge from these Atlantean or pre-Diluvian times, these ancient times. And they started moving around and spreading and migrating around and basically leaving those teachings and those histories with the different priest classes in those areas. And even in India, they say that the Sanskrit language did not originate in India. It was brought to India by the Arya. There's those stories as well. And those Arya would have been these ancient peoples that came from the Arctic homeland and the north. So lots of interesting things to get in. One thing I wanted to say about the 12, just on for the scientifically minded people, do you know how many cranial nerves you have in your head? 12, oddly enough.
How many strands of DNA?
12. So as we go on and on, 12 tribes of Judah, the whole thing. That the 12 is very important. The 12 zodiac, of course, there were more than 12 in the ancient zodiac, by the way, but the 12 major zodiacal signs are allegedly, or not allegedly, under what Josh was saying. And again, my colleague Michael Tessarian wrote an article called The Inner Zodiac. He was talking about that, the projection of the inner world onto the outer world. And so I think that all that brings a different layer of discussion to how we interpret ancient myths, because we now are bringing in the actual psychological framework and foundation of how those myths were produced, and then the trauma and the cataclysms and the possible interventions that may have happened that produced that. And then lastly, about Göbekli Tepe, there's a lot of talk, and I mean, I don't know, nobody does, but there's a lot of talk in the sort of, alternative community, UFO community, about Göbekli Tepe being some ancient high temple of ponies and rainbows. But I've actually found some interesting evidence indicating that at least at some point in the history of Göbekli Tepe, there were mass ritual sacrificing of women and children at that site. And they found all kinds of skulls. There's a bunch of science that got into it. And I got into that work and my whole cults research, getting into, the history of where a lot of the lineage of these cults could be coming from. And Göbekli Tepe may well have been, at least at a certain point, maybe later on. Maybe it started as a high culture item and then it was later on converted into a ritual sacrifice, which happens a lot, by the way. A lot of the monuments and the churches and the locations for certain things were put there because there's the idea that there are basically like acupuncture-like points across the planet, which people call like the ley lines or the, there's many names for it, but it's the idea that there's energy vortexes on the planet, and the ancient sites, these ancient ruins, are built on these nodes, which is why they'll have all these geometrical alignments. And it's interesting that a lot of them would have been built for the purpose of creating the best resonant field for somebody to commune with nature or God, but then could have later been turned into altars of human sacrifice and some great evil. Because that's what it is. It's about who controls the energy vortex of the planet, of the sun, moon, and stars, and of the psyche of humanity. I think that's what the big game is really all
Does
about.
that include Sedona, Arizona?
It does.
Sedona, Arizona? Why are you asking
It's
that?
on one of the node points of the ley lines. Yeah, it is.
I felt that when I was visiting there. What you
Okay.
described, I felt it.
Could be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So for people not familiar then, what is the story of Atlantis and how does that relate to Mars?
Josh, go ahead.
I can go, yeah. So there's a lot of speculation about this. Obviously, Plato had mentioned the city, not necessarily by name, talking about it at the gates of Gibraltar. And it really got rebirthed around the mid 1800s by a woman by the name of Madame Blavatsky. And what they were doing is they were really going deep into the occult mysteries, and they were utilizing a mechanism of channeling to basically go in contact these ancient beings, these ancient gods, these ancient pharaohs, and asking them questions. And one of the people that they channeled was apparently someone known as an Atlantean. And they came out and described this vast city. And this is where a lot of these writings, in the sense of modern day interpretation of Atlantis, come from. And I think what it is it's reminiscent in our psyche. I think it's something that exists within our psyche. I think a lot of what this channeling thing is really a connection with, the Akashic records, if you really want to call it. I think that there are some aspects of these beings that exist in the ether that we communicate with that maybe give us good or bad or hurtful information. We were just talking about ritual sacrifice. So you can actually go into this and how this prescribes to that. But really what we had is there was an ancient civilization on this planet. They called it Atlantis, and they had massive technology. A friend of mine, Dr. Michael Sala, he talks about how Atlantis was actually in the South Atlantic and were actually South Pacific, very similar to where Australia and New Zealand are now, and that in one day it shifted from its point in a very tropical area to where it is now in Antarctica. And they believe that Antarctica is potentially this lost city of Atlantis with 3 miles of ice on top of it. Underneath it is this brilliant city, and that the National Science Foundation, McMurdo based, all the military since Nazi Germany have been down there trying to excavate it and get this technology out of there. Atlantis is interesting, the Atlantis-Lemuria connection. There's another story that comes out of the Blavatsky times in the sense of Lemuria, which is the land of Mu, the people of Mu, and how these were warring factions. The Atlantis and Lemuria were at war, where Lemurians destroyed Atlantis. I take this back in the context in the sense of cultural attributions with stories and legends, and we can derive this back to the same story, the Anula Elish of Tiamat and Marduk, in the sense of warring factions. And it goes right back that one of these tribes or civilizations, most likely, I think, was probably on Mars, where the other one was on Earth, and they were at war with each other. That basically this is kind of the perspective that I come about in the sense of the Atlantean story, because I think it's a truly older story than what's actually being told. And this is what I've seen kind of in my research and within my understanding of the knowledge base, is that there was an ancient, highly advanced, technologically advanced, and spiritually advanced civilization on Mars. They came to Earth, and that on Earth there was a very, very primitive civilization of which they set up a colony and a camp here, and thousands upon thousands of years passed, and the colony on Earth grew. They intermingled with the native species on the planet, and humanity was born at that point. And then they revolted against Mars. After they revolted against Mars, Mars began to try to take back what was truly theirs, kind of like what England and the United States did back in 1775, right? And what happened is they killed the leader of that colony here on Earth as a sign to Mars to leave them alone. Mars struck back, and they had some type of advanced technology that Mars used against them. And we can see this in Indigo Leash. And then they go back and fight back against Mars and destroy Mars in the process with some type of planet-killing weapon that I think we look at it in the sense as something that pulls the atmosphere out of a planet or destroys the atmosphere. So either a nuclear bomb or some type of, I would assume that if it was a hydrogen or water-based planet, they could turn water into a hydrogen bomb and completely annihilate that whole planet. I don't know how they did it, but this is kind of what I've gotten through my research, and that would actually be the ancient legends and stories of Lemuria and Atlantis. And David, I know you got a completely different interpretation than me because we come from different lines of interpretation and understanding. So feel free to add in there and give your interpretation of Atlantis.
Oh no, I appreciate it. And that's great. I mean, I think that's what this is all about. We're peering into the ancient mysteries here, okay? And what I'm looking for is there's two categories here. One is the category of information and knowledge that can't be known by human beings. Like there's just a limit to what we as human beings on this planet, even the top guys, the Illuminati, whoever you think, there's a limit to what humans can know about all these mysteries. But then there's what is known on the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
By those that are keeping a lot of this from us. And I want to know what's known. So I'm not asking the universe, tell me all the things that a human couldn't possibly know. I just want to know why humanity has been kept in the dark and kept divided and fighting and killing each other for centuries over religions, over ideas, over all these different things. Look at the online world right now. Anytime you bring any stance or any theory on any single issue, you are going to be attacked relentlessly by the people that hate you for bringing it up. It's normal. But what's the truth? What is the truth? I also think it's fascinating to look into these things. And what I've found is that when you look into these theories, you learn a lot about yourself in the process. And I think that's spot. So I just wanted to say that. When it comes to Atlantis, the way I view Atlantis is that, I started with like Charles Berlitz and some of these great authors that brought it out, Ignatius Donnelly, Combs Beaumont, some of these other guys, Michael Tessarian, obviously, who wrote a book called Atlantis. And what he does in that book is get into the bring all the pieces on the table, all the ancient legends, and tell the story. The way when I put it all together, I see Atlantis not as just a singular place, a singular location on the planet. There obviously must have been like a home base, like Rome was located in Italy, British Empire in the Britain Isles. But it was an empire that had outposts all over the world, and possibly even off-world if we bring that element into it. Which, if that would be true, if this idea of a high level of civilization, pre some kind of either cataclysm or war, right? Like Josh was saying, maybe they blew Tiamat up or there was a war happening. There's that perspective. There's also just a simple perspective of it got destroyed by a comet. It got destroyed by some kind of natural catastrophe that happened and it wrecked everything. And then all the myths and legends were just writings about all that. Either way, we're looking at a mystery that in modern science today, it's not looked at with any level of real credibility. It's just something that kind of gets laughed out of the room. Well, when you get into people like David Hatcher Childress, who I highly recommend you bring on about this, he wrote lots of books about this and documented the corruption and scientific fraud conducted by like Smithsonian Institute, Vatican connection, and all this other stuff, and these universities, these royal societies that were created to essentially form the modern scientific world that we know now. And when you look into the history of how this rolled out, you find out that there's been nothing but violations of actual science, of the actual scientific method of trying to determine what the truth is. There's been cover-ups, people have gone missing, people have been murdered, people have been slandered, high-degreed archaeologists and historians have been, nobody's getting taught any of their work, right? And so I'm just personally a champion for those kind of people and those kind of theories, because I just want to know why. It's like today, you can't talk about certain hot button issues on YouTube, can you, Sean? Or you're going to get nuked on your channel. Why is that? Why can't we talk about anything we want? We're trying to figure out what the truth is here, right? Well, it's because someone's trying to cover something up, and we know that intuitively. So I tell people, if you think your news is fake and you think those fact checkers are annoying as hell, you know, the ones that only came online in 2020, and you think all this censorship is crazy. Well, just look at history. Look at these people we're bringing up, all these authors who've been slandered, censored, silenced, shadow banned well before it was cool. And what were they trying to tell you? A totally different perspective of human origins. Why is that not to be discussed? You're put into two pigeonhole arguments. One, creator, the God creation, the religious story, a literal interpretation of religion. That's one angle. The other angle is the materialist view, that there's nothing spiritual. There is no consciousness. There is no God. There's just matter and random accident. And it's the Darwinian evolutionary theory. Those are the two theories. Well, what if both of them are missing something and both of them cross-pollinate with each other to form a new thesis where there actually is a combination of both mechanisms? There's a macroevolutionary process that's easy to see. But what about the microevolutionary process is what I'm talking about. The macroevolutionary process is where the debate takes place. And that's where we bring in the idea that, let's say the universe has this natural unfolding evolutionary pattern to it, but then living beings like us, human beings that have at least a certain amount of free will, I believe we have free will, can change. Look, the oceans, like we're polluting the oceans. We've got all these things going on. Humans are affecting life, right? The planet. So if other beings are seeded throughout our galaxy and our universe, could all of these different aspects change the order of history and the way things roll out? And then when you bring that on board, it starts to ask the question, well, maybe it's a combination of creation and evolution. And what if we bring in this idea of intervention and lost ancient civilizations? That's a long way around to coming to the fact that what if? It's just a question, guys. Everybody just relax. We're not making declarative statements here. What if the stories of Atlantis are true and more, and we're just missing a lot of these pieces, and that story of Atlantis didn't just happen on our planet Earth, which is located on the outer rim of the Milky Way galaxy, right? If you take on board the premise that we live in a universe teeming with life, and that universe has many levels and multiverse levels to it, is it really so far-fetched for us to think that humanity as we are now is new on the block? That there was older versions of humanity, and that humanity wasn't only seated on this planet? If you bring that into the mix, now we got to look at all these things from a different perspective. And it always blows my mind how this theory is considered the most crazy, wacky theory of them all. It gets hate from every side, mainstream, alternate, doesn't matter. Why is this the one that freaks everybody out the most? And I think it has to do with our psychology and the fact that the human mind was traumatized in ancient times. It's been traumatized in modern times. And looking back at that scale of the size of the universe and the scope of what we're dealing with is traumatic, which is why we run to, let's go to the priests, let's go to the politicians, let's go listen to the media, let's not, and that's why we live like that. We ignore these big questions. So Atlantis to me is a bigger ball than just one little place in the Atlantic Ocean by Portugal or whatever. It's way bigger than that, and it might even go off planet in the end.
I think people are obsessed with what's going on now in the context of recent history. And if we look at the theory of infinite time, it's beyond our comprehension. So infinite time would not preclude interplanetary and possibly even intergalactic war over that much time. You know, how can we rule that out? We can't, because things would just be destroyed and, you know, rebuilded over so many years, and there would be no evidence of it. And now we're building what we're building again now. But what's going to happen when all that gets wiped out? And a million years from now, there's different theories about what we were doing in the present day now, or if we even existed, and people are laughing at that. So
Yeah, they find like a Pepsi can buried
Yeah.
somewhere, and they're like, "What is this ancient monument?" Like, think about that, right? That's such a good point, Sean. Like, when you think about it, really, like we're used to humans are calibrated to our world, our reality. Okay, that's how, and that's natural. You need to be, or you'll go insane. But if you zoom out just a little bit and you go, yeah, wait a minute, where are we really? Like, I brought this quote up in the beginning of my Cult of the Medics documentary series, and we're going to be revisiting in the later chapters this idea from Charles Fort, who was early 1900s. He was a paranormal researcher, writer, and he basically had a very shocking statement that I read years ago that just shook me, and I could never unshake it, where he said, if you take it all into consideration, I think we're property. I think that we are living on somebody else's property, that at least they claim it. That's what their claim is. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means that's their claim. That somehow all others are warned off, and this is a controlled experiment that's happening. Or he also likened it to a human farm. Like, it's like there's a farming operation happening. Like, and I think about it like,
Jupiter
and I'm not
ascending.
going to freak everybody out here because it's not just negative to this. It's just, we have to think about it. That what if, just as we humans, if we just look at ourselves, we can actually unrail this. What did Mike Barra say, Josh, when we asked him, what do you think about aliens? Like, what's your best explanation to people that think you're crazy when you talk about alien stuff? And he goes, well, the fact that you and I exist is evidence enough for at least the possibility, the very strong possibility, that we're not the only ones that exist. Because I'm not the only human that exists. Josh is not the only human. There are humans watching this. There are humans all over this planet. So all we have to do is move the lens to a bigger scale. And all of a sudden, it makes it at least possible that we're talking about something way bigger here. And then if we look at, okay, now let's look at the activities of humans on the planet. What do? We use animals as resources. We use them as experimental subjects. Look at what DARPA's doing, you know, blending fish and dolphin and human DNA and all this kind of creepy stuff. We go to other countries on the planet and we milk them for resources. We invade, we enslave, we take over. This has been happening for centuries. So when you think, well, if we human beings are doing these things, we're already cloning sheep. We're creating hybrids already, and it's 2022. What do you think we're going to achieve 100 years from now? And what if there's an advanced civilization only 100 or 200 or maybe even 500 years ahead of us? And they look at this planet and they go, oh, there's lots of resources. Cha-ching. It harbors life. It's the perfect life harboring planet with the right distance from the sun. Cha-ching. Oh, and also these beings have DNA. And that DNA might be valuable to us. I'm just thinking from their perspective. It's just theoretical. And if that DNA is valuable to us, it might be valuable for a few different reasons. What are humans? What is Elon Musk talking about right now? Guys, we eventually got to get off planet. Why? Well, because we need to find other humans, need to explore. It's part of our thing. But we also, we've damaged our DNA. We've damaged a lot of things on the planet. And we have to seek other homes and we got to seek other resources. And it's just what humans do. Well, if we're not the only human or the only sentient being out there, is it really so far-fetched to think that some other planet might go, just like we would look at Africa or some other country? Oh, look at those resources. Let's just keep those people dumbed down so we can go milk the resources. Why wouldn't they do it to a planet?
Yeah.
So
It's repeated
naturally when you think about this.
And it's repeated through Hollywood. I mean, you can watch Jupiter Ascending is one that comes to mind. Stargate, SG-1 series, is that humanity is an owned planet and humanity itself are the channel or the resource. So it's not too far off to believe. Do I really believe in that? Well, it's potential. I think we can look at a lot of our mythology, a lot of these ancient stories and really pull that type of context out of it. Right. And I just want to add this in there. There was no coordination between me and David to where Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, the two best rock bands ever in the world, who just both happen to be British on this show today. We did not coordinate this. It's just one of those things.
Not
I mean, it's how the universe comes together.
Synchronicity. Josh, what is your definition of ancient cataclysm?
Something that happened in the past, I would say at least a minimum of 10,000 years ago, that created an upheaval on the earth, whether it was earthquakes and tsunamis, or even something even worse in the sense of solar flares, or we could even look at it in the sense of man-made, nuclear disasters, those types of things. But it would be some type of global event that basically halted the progression of evolution on this planet and probably killed a lot of species.
Are we due for some more cataclysm?
I do believe we are. David had mentioned our position in the galaxy. If anybody is familiar with Mandela effects, what David just did there is he actually talked about a Mandela effect. He said we are on the outer arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Actually, no, that we're not. We're on the Orion arm. We're in the middle of the galaxy. This is a Mandela effect because I believed my whole life that we were on the outer arm of the galaxy. I remember Carl Sagan talking we're on the outer arm of the galaxy. We're not. We're actually in the middle of the galaxy, apparently. And there was never any talk about us being on the outer arm of the galaxy. So me and David are from the same universe, and we somehow transferred over to this one where we both believe that we're on the outer arm of the galaxy. And that is a true Mandela effect, by the way, just for people that didn't know that.
And I'm totally, hey, wherever we're situated, I'm using that as an example to say, guys, you ever seen how big like our galaxy is and how many galaxies there might be? That's all we're saying is we're a little speck in a massive universe. And that also doesn't take away the value and the meaning and the relevance to our existence, by the way. I think a lot of people go there, but I don't believe that.
Right.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. What are the range of possible cataclysmic events that could happen?
So I think there's ones that actually occur naturally through various types of progressions through the precessional cycles. And I think that this is a lot of what our ancient cultures were talking about. And this is why they kept highly accurate astronomical calendars. When we start to look at our transit through the galaxy, we understand that the galaxy has black holes at the centers. There's a discretion disk that goes out there. It compresses gravity, mass, and energy at the center. And we transit that galactic center every so often. And so that means that we go through periods of high impedance within the galaxy, and we go through periods of low impedance. And if we actually map this out, kind of very similar to how we map the moon out through the sky or the sun out through the sky, if you put it at noon every day and you look, you get what's called an analemma wave. It's a figure 8 that's actually created in the sky. Well, our solar system, if you observed it from outside of the galaxy, would do the same thing, which means that we have 2 equinoxes and 2 solstices. We have a summer and a fall in the sense of the Earth's transit, the solar system's transit through the galaxy. And I think that when we come out or when we go in and come out of those high periods of impedance within the center of the galaxy is there's mass cataclysm. And we can even see this through the historical record. We can see some type of mass cataclysm happening about every 10,000 to 12,000 years within the historical record. I've had a few guests on my shows that have came out and talked about this. Michael Kremel, David Hatches-Triller will talk about it. I had an NYU professor that came out and was actually talking about how we see it about every 12 to 15,000 years. There's some type of massive, whether it's the magnetic fields shifting or what it is, there's some type of mass cataclysmic event on this planet. So I think that it's naturally inclined that it's just our position in the galaxy that occurs, and that our ancient ancestors were telling us about this and we forgot about the information over time.
Guys, this has been mind-blowing. I can't thank you enough. Can you just tell the viewers where they can find you, support you, and watch your series?
Yeah, Josh actually just created a really awesome website, themarschronicles.com, and all the links are there. We both stream it out on all of our live streaming platforms, and those links are listed on that website. And then my main website is dwtruthwarrior.com. I've got it linked there as well. And then Josh, let them know about your sites as well.
Yeah, you can find me at redpills.tv. That is the URL, redpills.tv, as well as you can find me on Telegram, t.me/redpillstv, all one word. And much appreciated, Sean. Thank you so much.
Much appreciated, David and Josh. And guys who are watching this, viewers who are watching this, please go over, support what they're doing. The links will be in the description box below the video. There's going to be far more content in much more detail in the series. And we hope to see you guys soon. So good luck with what you're doing, fellas. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having us. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right, we're going over to Matthew Steeples and Jimmy Savile and the Untouchable, the feedback we've been getting on the Jimmy Savile documentary, and we're going to be bringing Andrew Gold back in, and we're going to be bringing Matthew in. And this is the orange theme. I hope everybody watching, you've got to be wearing orange right now if you're watching this.
Well, one person isn't.
What are you talking about, mate? I should just clarify, Sean, when you said I'm going to be bringing in Matthew Steeples and Jimmy Savile, that's I just
Well,
want to be
we
very
can bring
clear.
in Jimmy Savile. He's safely somewhere else, probably in hell.
I want to be very clear. That's not who I am, and I do not. I will fix it for you, but that's about as far as it will go. Well, I won't fix it for you actually. But it was a lovely idea for a TV show. Unfortunately, that's spoiled now forever.
And then we've got Norman Baker coming up next to talk about the royal family. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Matthew, can you just tell the viewers a little bit about you and the Steeples Times?
I write about all sorts of different things. Mostly a person whose name I guess I cannot mention. Her initials are G and M. That's all I shall say about that. And I write about lots of different other matters. But I did participate in your fantastic program the other day.
Yes, and we're both going to be participating in Crime Con. No, all three of us are going to be at Crime Con 2022, aren't we? Coming up next month.
Yeah.
And if the viewers any of you want to come and meet us at Crime Con, if you go to their website and put in Attwood as a discount code, I think you get 10% off the ticket price. So we look forward to meeting some of you there. And Matthew, so what I really appreciate the article you wrote about the Jimmy Savile documentary Untouchable. What kind of feedback have you been getting from it in your circle?
Well, the most interesting thing about this is that people from America have written to me who are much younger, who've never heard of Jimmy Savile. And that is quite fascinating. It's reached a new generation the same way that the Menendez case has now touched a new generation. Netflix and programs like yours take it to a new audience. This is a case that, it was over 10 years ago, really, because he was dead 10 years ago. But a program like that takes it to a new audience. And I think that's a very interesting demographic and how the media has changed.
Matthew, why is it important to bring this to new demographics?
Because there are new cases, such as the Tim Westwood, the DJ, who is now being accused of doing similar things. It is still a relevant story that these people got away with what they did.
And if we don't shine the light, then they're going to continue to get away with it. What
Absolutely.
do you think Netflix could have gone in harder with, Matthew?
Netflix could have gone harder on the necrophilia, I think.
It wasn't mentioned, was it?
Yeah. Well, I think what he did, Edwina Curry allowing him the keys to the mortuary. Everybody's been a little bit excusory of her behaviour. I have met Edwina Curry. I know her daughter. Mrs. Curry is all too convenient to forget her role in this story. And I think it's time that all these kind of people were called out. Everyone talks about Margaret Thatcher. They talk about Prince Charles. Talk about the people who actually really allowed him to do what he did.
Is that alleged about Edwina Curry, or is that fact?
Edwina Curry helped him gain access to facilities, yes.
Did she play a role in him gaining access to Broadmoor?
Yes. 100%.
Okay.
And, he had access to these facilities then, mental patients and corpses. Are there people corroborating that he did actually engage in this nefarious activity with corpses?
Well, I can't confirm. I don't know. I wasn't present, so we don't know that. But there's plenty of people who've said he did, and there are plenty who said he did other things. Like, for example, when I wrote about the person who bought his Range Rover and his Rolls Royce, which they planned to use for children's parties, they said to me, you know, we're going to have to burn these damn things because the things that have gone on in the back of he used to have double beds in the back of the Range Rover and the Ford Fiesta van. He really had some very sick things going on in his life.
Because we know sorry, Andrew, go on.
Well, I was just going to say it's an issue, I guess, with journalists and stuff. We know that when somebody is dead, obviously defamation isn't a thing. So that thing about the dead people, I wonder if that's why Netflix didn't go, because we're always saying, we know a lot of people have said it, but obviously we can never really prove
your
it.
program, Sean, you had Christopher Barry D talking about that. He is a very respected journalist. You know, he talked about that. Okay, the journalist, I forget his name, he was going to be on Channel 5 tonight with his big program at 9:00. He doesn't believe in that, but I think Jimmy Savile didn't care whether it was living, dead, or otherwise. He really was into anything, from what I gather.
Yes, you're referring to Christopher Berry D, who is
Yes.
the biggest true crime author in the world.
Precisely, and he said on your program about the necrophilia, he was very specific about it. I did listen in detail, so you know I will say he was specific. I think plenty of other people have been. Mark William Thomas says he doesn't know whether that's true or not, but well, there we are.
What was really sad then when we were doing the research for the documentary was the testimonies of nurses, for example, at facilities that Savile was working at. And if a patient would come to them, you know, they were told just to hush it up. If a patient complained that Jimmy had done something, they were told to hush it up. And then you've got victims saying that, you know, I did report this to a nurse, and the nurse said, well, that's Jimmy. You know, we can't do anything about it. You best not tell anybody. So that's really sad, isn't it?
Well, I think your two victims who came on, the man and the woman, they both said the same thing. You know, they talked about the poor lady who committed suicide, and you know, he threatened anybody who got in his way. He knew how to handle idiot victims as he saw them. He referred to these people as stupid.
Is that not a bit harsh?
Well, it's very harsh on them, yes, but that's treated these people. He was a bully, but he knew how to manipulate people. Like when he got in the car with Louis Theroux when he drove to Scotland, and he was asked a question, and the question was, Jimmy, people say things about you. And he said, they can say whatever they want, but I'll take them all down with me and I'll destroy them all on the way. He knew how to manipulate the system.
Do you see that Theroux one, Sean? It's just the most remarkable thing I've ever seen.
It's hard to get to access the first one now, isn't it? You can watch the apology one.
Oh.
But I think the first one's been disappeared off the internet.
I've got a video of it somewhere. I'll show you one day.
I bet you do. Oh, good.
Just watch
I knew all about his program about Neil and Christine Hamilton, you see, because I knew them quite well. So.
Oh, right. That was around the same time.
That was how I got interested in Louis Theroux. It wasn't because of Jimmy Savile. I was involved with Neil and Christine Hamilton back long ago. So Theroux was, you know, he actually was very clever. And in that car journey to Scotland, he quizzed him. And that man said, if you threaten me, I'll take you all down.
We didn't say that to Louis.
Yes, he did. He said he answered the question. He answered his question. He said, anybody who accuses me of doing anything, I'll take you all down.
He said a lot of weird stuff in that. It's a weird little car
journey. In that car
journey,
you look up the quote. You know, there it is. I've quoted this quote repeatedly over the years.
Oh, right. I remember the bit before because he's saying, Louis says, why is it you say you hate children? And he said, well, it's, you know, easier to say you hate them, isn't it? If people, well, you know, and Louis says, but it's even more suspicious when you start saying you hate children. And he just sort, I guess he then says what you've just quoted, Matthew. So it's a really awkward little scene, that, isn't it?
The worst scene in my mind was when he showed up with his fishnet vest.
Oh,
Well, he had many different weird outfits, that's for sure. And they were all sold at auction, and some stupid people bought them. I think most of them ended up on a bonfire, a bit like Rolf Harris's paintings, to be honest.
So, Matthew, you've talked about how he had control of politics, royalty, you know, he had connections at the top of every section of the establishment and government and royalty. Would you say that the foundation of his protection, of his insulation from incarceration, was his Friday lunch club with the police?
Well, I think that was a central part of it. He had his local protection, which was obviously very important because he lived there, and obviously he did things there. And Ray Tennant, his driver, who died in prison, another paedophile and monster, aided him in that. But he obviously had other people, but he had politicians ranging from Edward Heath to, Edwina Curry, to all sorts of people helping him. He conned the royal family. He conned a lot of people. He was a very able person when it came to manipulating people. And I suppose we lived in a different age then, before the internet and Google, and that poor lady that you had on the program, Untouchable. Where did she have to turn to? Where did her friend have to turn to? Because nobody listened to them, because everybody said, "This is Jimmy Savile, leave him alone." The BBC, but the culture at the BBC, we still see as not quite fixed, because this Tim Westwood case again shows it in a different age, in the woke era. Look what's happened to these poor women that he supposedly attacked, if that is true. So the BBC haven't learned their lesson.
You touched on it being a different era and all of that. And I think, does that get forgotten sometimes? And not in any sense excusing him, but if anything, criticising the culture of yesteryear. Because the amount of musicians and stuff who were at it, and I've made the mistake of sort of saying names before, and obviously it's all allegedly, so I won't do that now before Sean gets into a panic. But, some of the biggest, most famous rock stars in the world are known to have been involved with 13, 14-year-old girls. One in particular wrote a song about it and blasted it all over the radio. I'm talking about an American singer. I mean, it was a strange time, wasn't it? Almost.
Well, people have different standards depending on who they are, but at the end of the day, abuse is abuse.
Yeah. I just want to congratulate you both on that documentary, by the way. It's absolutely fantastic. And Sean, you end with such a powerful moment to camera. What did it mean to you to make this film? How long was it in the making?
So it took 4 years approximately to make it. And a huge credit to James of Underground Films for structuring it so well. I thought, I didn't realize how powerful the structure was till I actually watched it. Yeah. During the premiere, my parents said they were gripped. They watched the whole thing, and we've had so many comments come in from people just saying that usually I tune in for this, tune in for that, but this, I put all that time aside to watch the whole thing. So it's great. The survivors should not be forgotten. There was a lot of focus on Savile in all these documentaries. The BBC one's coming out soon as well. And I thought it was extremely...
Can I interrupt you and say, in any situation, it's always the victim who should be remembered first, rather than the perpetrator. We always talk about the criminal before the victim, and the victim is so important.
That's why we were honoured to have on exclusively Kelly Gold, who was a former Top of the Pops dancer.
Yes,
and friend of Claire McAlpine, who should
and the
be
gentleman
remembered.
as well, who was from Liverpool.
Yes, Stephen French. So Claire McAlpine kept a diary of what had happened to her, and it wasn't just Savile. There was a world famous singer. There was a famous DJ. She feared that she was pregnant. She put this in a diary. Her mum found it. And when the mum approached the BBC denied anything like that had possibly happened. She was a fantasist. So then the mum turned to the Met Police, who lost the diary. So that is an absolute abomination. That not only was this person, the mum, not listened to, but Machiavellian maneuvers were made so that diary would disappear into the Bermuda Triangle. That's a travesty of justice right there. So I think Netflix and the BBC should help raise these kinds of stories as well as focusing on the general mainstream media story. That's what was important to me, to go deeper and to expose things and to try and keep the memories of people like Claire McAlpine living on. She was only 15 at the time.
Are there any rumours or talk of him passing on any offspring? Is there anything like that?
I don't know about that. What have you heard anything, Matthew?
Well, there were allegedly incidents when people became pregnant, but he always denied it.
So it is, I
don't know.
The realms of possibility, isn't it?
Whether there were ever any DNA tests or anything, probably unlikely. He probably just bullied them into shutting up.
Yeah. Did you ever come across him, Matthew?
I never personally met the man. No.
Sean.
I was very lucky on that regard.
When I was a kid,
when I was a child who wanted to go on Jim Will Fix It to me, and I think that this child did go on the program, and they wanted to meet this creature called the Samphire, from the BBC series. I can't remember what it was called, the thing that dug into the sand, and they did manage to go on it. So, but it was a child that lived in the same village as me or something. So that's the end. That's the close. I never ever. I always found him a bit creepy, but I think most people did.
As a kid, I was never inclined towards his show either. I was more of a Tiswas. I preferred Tiswas than the BBC stuff.
I like listening to Just William, as I did on Radio 4 this morning. I prefer something a bit more innocent, to be honest.
These are not only very British references that few people are going to understand, but they're also Stone Age references. But it is interesting
we're
for me
Stone
to
Age,
speak to...
are we? So you're the youngster here.
I am, of course I am. I'm a generation younger than you, I hope or believe, than both of you guys. But it's good to be able to talk to you guys about the old world and the way it was. I should just say, I've just done a little research here. Jimmy Savile never had children. However, in 2015, The Mirror reported a 29-year-old woman claimed she may be Savile's daughter after her mother, Georgina Martin, previously said, "I have carried the terrible secret that my child is likely to belong to Jimmy Savile for 3 decades."
Well, she wouldn't have inherited very much because most of it got taken by the litigators and the victims. So, and the penthouse got pulled down in Leeds, which the building is still there, but his apartment no loss.
What about Savile's connection to the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe? Prior to the incarceration of Sutcliffe and then at Broadmoor, it was like an ongoing thing, wasn't there?
Well, maybe there was some connection, but maybe not, because as many of your guests said on the program, he was a bit of a lone operator and he did his own thing. He liked to do things in the back of his, Range Rover and his Ford Fiesta van. Whether he would have wanted to have joined in with somebody else who was equally power crazy is another matter, but who knows? It's possible. But after his incarceration, Jack, the Yorkshire Ripper, Savile did introduce him to Frank Bruno.
Do you think that Savile was just drawn to killers and sickos?
I think Savile liked to have anybody as long as they had attention around them, because he'd like to show off to them to show he was more important than them in his mind. I would think he would have been on an ego trip to say, I'm bigger than you.
It's interesting what Sean's saying there, because there's that clip, isn't there, with him with Gary Glitter, and they almost seem to be winking at each other on TV. Do you know what I mean? And it is an interesting thought, a disgusting one too, of the two of them and other people like them sitting around and maybe off camera, gloating to one another about what they've done.
They are all very, very sick people, but I don't know that much about them. I know more about Rolf Harris and Max Clifford and other people of that type, and they all have the same attention demand, that they want to be the big character.
So with Clifford being dead, then and Savile's dead, we can't get done for defamation or cyberbullying. So what was Max Clifford's role in that whole era of cover-ups and
Max Clifford was very good at one thing. He would say to a newspaper, "You don't upset my client, I will give you this story instead. So I trade you. You have this, and you shut up about that." And that's how he worked. That's how he worked for people like the man who ran Blackpool Football Club, of course, Orange, Owen Oyston. He represented him. He had on his board of directors Stuart Hall. These people all were, and the protection of each other was very key to their agenda.
How did Clifford maintain that for so long, and what caused his downfall?
He got too arrogant in the end. He just couldn't stop himself. He thought he was God. And he flew too close to the sun, if you want to make a comparison of that nature.
Icarus.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Did you see that clip, Andrew, where Max Clifford comes up behind the TV presenter who's outside the courthouse,
yes,
and starts imitating the TV presenter behind the camera? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it? It's so weird.
Really, really creepy.
Well,
go on.
I had threats from Max Clifford's daughter after his death. The Cliffords are a very arrogant family. I exposed the fact that she recreated his very own website. She thought she could just carry on as him.
There's a funny, sort of funny Max Clifford anecdote I've got, because I interviewed a guy on my podcast called Chris Atkins recently, and Chris is a journalist, documentary maker who exposed Max Clifford and was a big part in getting him put in prison. But Chris also was done for tax fraud, and then he got put in prison for 2.5 years. And when he walked in, he saw Max Clifford there, and he sort of comes in, and Max Clifford says to him, "Oh God, you've come to rub it in," or something like that. And he's like, "No, I'm living down the hall now." And it's sort of had a little chat and all that.
Wow,
that's bizarre.
So funny.
But Max Clifford, when he died, everybody said, "How on earth did he have a luxury bed in prison? He had a bed better than anybody else. He had a mattress brought in specially. He got special privileges to the end, because he still was controlling people even then."
So
he was. Go on, Sean.
So Matthew, you're being asked about another character from the media from that era, and that is Jill Dando. What are your thoughts on Jill Dando's death? And what she was investigating?
I never knew Jill Dando. I had a situation of my own in my relations. We had a lady who I won't name today, but we'll talk about it another time, who was shot in a similar way in West London at around the same time, and she was killed with a crossbow on her doorstep. I won't talk about that tonight, but Jill Dando did probably know rather a lot about Savile, and I don't believe her death was linked to Savile, but it's a possibility.
Wow, that's a bold thing to say.
But my relative death was very, very similar in West London, and I think there's more likely. But we'll talk about that another time.
Agree.
Bloody hell. I never even knew. I mean, I was only, again, not to go on about the generation gap, but I was only 8 years old when Jill Dando was shot. Was it outside her house, I think? But even, I still remember that because it was just such a big, crazy, unexpected thing. I never knew there might be a potential link to, people knowing too much about Savile and that kind of thing.
Well, it was regularly mentioned, but she was also connected with things in Yugoslavia at the time, and there were other matters because she was a Crime Watch presenter.
Oh, of course. Very sad.
And she was a lovely lady, and I think it's terrible how she died. And and her fiance, he's never been, he's been exonerated in all of this, and no justice for her death, and that's very sad.
Yeah, and if people want to watch more about Matthew's thoughts on Rolf Harris, we've got a clip out on the channel. It's got almost 100k views, and the clip starts with actual footage of Rolf and Jimmy, and it's
disgusting.
disgusting.
And but his most recent episode of when he went to visit the school and he started waving at the children is equally appalling. The man has no shame, and I've met Rolf Harris on a number of occasions, and frankly, everyone I know who owned his paintings have burnt the damn things because, frankly, who'd want them? I found the wife more worrying, actually, in many ways. She's very, very strange, and the daughter, she changed her tune as she went along in the story. Bindi Nichols, Bindi is somebody I have not much respect for.
Right, bloody hell.
And Orwin Hughes equally.
It's interesting because obviously there's two types of these people who molest children, and there's a sort of psychopath, which we would imagine Jimmy Savile is, and then you've got a type who maybe is not a psychopath perhaps, but maybe they are battling with their demons and they decide to do it anyway. It's still unforgivable, but different kinds. And so Rolf Harris seems, I would have no idea. What do you think? Which kind is he? A horrible acting psychopath, or is he sort of an unforgivable person who let himself, do what he wanted to do, kind of thing?
Rolf Harris is just an arrogant man who thought he could do anything he wanted. He did whatever he wanted in Australia, and they got sick of him, so he came here, and then he got caught, and he still thinks he can get away with it. In prison, he wrote poems about these women and called them the woodworm women.
Bloody hell.
And that's disgusting. And then when he got out, he went crawling around the outskirts of children's playgrounds. He doesn't seem to have any remorse for his activity. There he is living in Maidenhead and thinks he can carry on, but nobody wants to know him. But he continues to make a fortune from his royalties, just like Gary Glitter. They all continue to make money from their past lives, and well, nobody can stop that because that's part of their existence. But it's just appalling to think of it.
Before we bring Norman Baker in, then I am going to just do a quick survey of the viewers. Please put a 1 in the chat on whatever platform you are on. We've got them all collated here. If you have watched our Savile documentary, Untouchable. Put a 2 in the chat if you have not yet watched it. And put a 3 in the chat if it is on your to-do list. Just want to see how it's going there with the... Yep. Looks like a lot of people have watched it so far. While those are coming in, Matthew, do you want to tell the viewers where they can find you and support you and read the Steeples Times?
Well, they're very welcome to read the Steeple Times, thesteepletimes.com. And they can follow me on Twitter. Again, Steeple Times. So that's the best place for it.
And people can come and meet all three of us at CrimeCon 2022. Do you know the dates of that off the top of your head, Matthew?
Well, I'll be there on the 12th of June, I believe, with you.
Me
We're there for 2 or 3 days, I think, aren't we?
No, I think
Saturday
it's
and
only
Sunday,
2
isn't it?
days.
Saturday and
11th
Sunday.
11th
Yeah,
and
so
12th. isn't it?
Saturday and Sunday, and then it's 11th and 12th of June. But our little event is on 11 o'clock on the 12th of June.
And if you do
Matthew,
come to CrimeCon, go to the CrimeCon website, and if you put in Attwood, ATT Wood, you will get a discount on the ticket price. The people are asking, where is the Savile doc? Presently, the Savile doc is on YouTube, and also a version has just gone up on Rumble, a 4 minute 21 4 hour 21 minute version that's got some David I content at the end of it. I'll just leave that at that.
Yeah. Are you
All right.
Matthew, are you looking forward to meeting me at the thingy at the CrimeCon? Matthew.
Oh, well, most definitely, yes. I hope you'll be wearing something orange because we both made the effort.
We all made the effort, mate. We've all made the effort.
You need a bit more.
We're
There's
gonna
an orange thing at the bottom of the screen, though, so at least you've done that.
we're gonna shave Andrew's back, Matthew, and then we're gonna put a body hugging lycra orange luminescent top on him for the duration of CrimeCon.
Gosh, it sounds very criminal.
Oh, thank you for the super chat. Hang tight. It is appreciated. Whoops, scrolling that there. Where are we? Really appreciate the super chat from Hang Tight. And we are about to bring in Norman Baker, and I'll be seeing Matthew later this week. So cheers, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Okay, I'll see you on Friday.
Cheers, Matthew.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. I'm going to take a break now, and it's going to be Norman and Andrew.
Yeah.
So here we
It's
go.
exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. I can take this off now. I think Norman looks like he's on the phone, so I don't want to get him while he's on the phone.
Ooh. Can you take us off, Andrew? It's not working at my
Hello,
end.
mate. How you doing? Norman, can you hear me?
Mine's
Can't
frozen.
You're on. He's on the show. Do you know, hello, Norman. I'll pop him down in case he says it. Can you see me, Norman? Gonna pop him down for a minute, just in case he picks his nose or something and doesn't know he's on. He looked ready though, didn't he? But I wouldn't want him, doing things that he doesn't know he's on. Shall I try him again now? I'm just gonna pop him on. Norman. Norman. Is he having me on? Norman.
Can you hear me, Andrew?
Norman. This is fantastic live stuff right now. Oh, I'm clicking things. Everyone give me your messages. I don't know what's going on here. Everyone shout Norman in the chat. Just write Norman with an exclamation.
Can you hear me that end?
Yeah, it's Norman. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Put your headphones on. Hang on. Hang on. Norman, put...
Oh, I heard something there, yeah.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Let me try again.
All right. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Got a lot of people in today, 957. Everyone's putting Norman now. Everyone's writing Norman. This is great. We're going to make a movement of this, of the getting Norman involved day. And let's see, he's coming back in a minute. Do not worry. Oh, it's just a black screen at the moment. Oh, can you hear me?
I can. No, you sound like a Dalek.
Can you hear me? Exterminate.
No.
No. Oh, so you can hear a tiny bit. What about headphones? Can you see me? Can you see me?
I can't. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh my word!
It's just kind of electronic noise.
Have you got headphones?
I haven't got any headphones.
Shit. I shouldn't swear. I don't know what to do. Okay. Oh, who's popping in now? I don't think that's anyone. All right. What I'll do is see if... Oh, there's Sean, yeah. Okay, Norman... Okay, I'm going to message him on here. See if you can talk to Ash.
I think the system has crashed. I think it got so busy, and possibly hackers that the system has crashed, Andrew.
They're against us, mate.
I'm just
For
going to
now,
check.
should we can talk about this because I've got a lot to say about the whole subject, Meghan Markle and Netflix.
Let's have a look. My internet speed's okay. They're not hacking my internet service provider this week.
Well, it's not you. It's just Norman can't hear me. I can't hear anything except electronic noises punctuated by the odd word. Very odd.
Yeah. So, do you have anything you're going to talk about, Andrew? Because I'm going to have to take a break because I've got to come back.
Yeah.
Immediately in about 20 minutes.
Okay. Why? Well, I can talk about all sorts of stuff. I'll talk a bit about Meghan Markle. I'll promote my podcast. Talk all about who's on that at the moment. That's what everyone wants to hear about. What do you think, Sean?
You freestyle, and I'll listen on while I get a snack down me.
Okay, I'll bear that in mind. I'll imagine that one.
You're on fire at the beginning. Carry the torch, brother.
Get me started. Get me started about Meghan Markle. Right, I'm going on about Meghan Markle until Norman gets along here. I'm livid about the whole thing. Does annoy me. Now, the thing... Okay, Meghan Markle, who's that? That's what you're wondering about, isn't it, everyone? Well, you know who she is. And she is... she married some prince or something, right? It does wind me up, right? And I'm not going to go into Diana, but I remember Christopher Hitchens, he said something about Princess Diana back in the day. Because there is this whole, hero thing. And I get it. But it is marrying just a very wealthy, rich, aristocratic person who hasn't achieved much. And it does do my head in, the whole thing. Like I don't understand why that's an achievement. And the Meghan thing really annoys me because she basically decided to marry a prince but didn't want to do the duties that comes with being a princess. Just checking, Norman's going to try on his mobile in a minute. So what annoys me, and well, okay, maybe I'll save that for him because otherwise I'll be repeating myself. Who wants to hear about Sean's bath? No, I'm just joking. Sean likes a nice bath. I'm a bath man myself, and we were chatting while he was in the bath before. Often between shooting, Sean will go and have a nice bath. I don't think I can sufficiently relax between takes of this to have a bath. For those of you who don't know me, by the way, I'm Andrew Gold from On the Edge with Andrew Gold podcast. I'm a former BBC journalist. I don't really work for them anymore because it's impossible to make videos for them because of the whole, part of the whole woke industry thing that we'll get into with Meghan Markle. That's a huge part of why I don't work with them anymore, and I make stuff with beautiful people like Sean and producer Ash, all about cognitive biases and extreme beliefs and cultish personalities, cultish people. A lot of the same stuff as Sean does, and that's available on audio and YouTube. On the Edge with Andrew Gold. Next week, actually, it's one of my favourite ever people I've interviewed, and I want to get her on this show. And I don't know if it's going to be interesting for you guys, actually, but who's seen Molly's Game? Molly Bloom, one of my favourite ever people I interviewed. She did a cards game with Leonardo DiCaprio and all those people. Really, really interesting. But hang on, I don't have to talk about myself anymore because I think Norman's getting ready. He's just sort of messing about in the green room at the moment. But do take this time to subscribe to On the Edge with Andrew Gold. And the other thing about me is I'm now best friends with Ash and Sean and Norman as well. I'm not going to play guitar for you. I would have actually if Norman wasn't now ready. It's something I could have done. Or piano back there. But I will leave that. I was playing She's the One by Robbie Williams just before. Norman, are you ready?
Well, I'm ready on my mobile phone rather than the laptop for some reason, but there we are.
You look terrible, but no, you look all right. You look fine. You sound good. You're doing well. What's gone wrong with you? It doesn't matter. That's your computer. Computers are computers, aren't they? What's the latest with Meghan and that?
With Meghan, I don't think she's responsible for the laptop not working. Well, look, I mean, Meghan is either, persecuted or a bloody nuisance, depending on your point of view, I suppose.
Well, those are both negatives. Well, no, persecuted is not. Right, I get it.
No, persecuted is defending her. It's kind of saying she's been picked on. But I mean, they are a bit like John and Yoko, aren't they? Those two.
Yeah. I think. Well, would she be Yoko and he was John in the sense that he was a successful prince?
John in the sense that could you imagine them having a bed in Amsterdam together?
That sort of hippie, not actually really doing much for the world, but talking a lot about it kind of sense.
Yes. Give peas a chance.
give peas a chance. And Meghan and Prince Harry, they've had their cartoon cancelled. What's going on?
Well, I mean, I think they got a very good deal out of Netflix. Netflix obviously paid them far too much. They're not delivering the goods, and what they are delivering is pretty shoddy. So I think Netflix are probably, nursing their wounds a bit.
Do they still get the money then?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen the contract, but I imagine some of it is guaranteed, some of it was optional, and I imagine they're now cancelling the optional bits.
Is it possible that they are just utterly talentless?
I don't think they're talentless, but I just think that they wouldn't be getting the deal they were getting unless they were who they are. They've been bought up on the basis of their name without anyone looking too carefully as to whether they can actually deliver any programs or not. I mean, the fact that he's a prince doesn't mean he's any good at making programs. Elvis Presley was a very good singer, but someone made a big mistake putting him into films, in my view. And you can't automatically do two things just because you're good at one.
Oh, I'm loving the references today. There was something called Tis Was that Sean was talking about. I don't know what that is. We were talking about, of course, Jim Will Fix It. And you've gone back to Elvis Presley. I mean, my best recollection of that is him in Forrest Gump, but it wasn't really him, or it was a computer animation of him.
You can see Elvis everywhere because there are now the number of Elvis impersonators is growing every year. In fact, by about 2065, half the world will be impersonating Elvis. But they always impersonate him in his 1968 Las Vegas white suit, Fat Elvis, because the number of people who can do the kind of leather-clad 1956 version are quite few.
Well, there's an obesity epidemic, isn't there? And there's a crisis, and sugar, big problem. So yeah, we are all struggling to do a slim Elvis. It's all the big impressions. But yeah, it winds me up as a content maker myself. I've made documentaries for the BBC and HBO, and I've done it myself, just filming it. And it's not easy. And it winds me up that they have now had Netflix give them loads of money to make something, and they were rubbish at it. And it is hard to do, but surely they could have just got a team together and actually, not been so arrogant as to assume that they'd make something brilliant, because they haven't. And Spotify paid them a mad amount of money as well, right? And they didn't.
Yeah, look, I mean, I paid to Netflix or Spotify. Give me a tenth of what you give you, Harry. I'll give you a decent product out of it.
The rest of us are making podcasts and things for free. We're doing it off our own back, and I'm livid. I am livid because they after, what is it, 7 or 8 months, this Spotify thing, they haven't made a single bloody thing, have they? And now they're going to go on Oprah a second time. Is that happening?
Well, I expect so, because Oprah's friends with Meghan. But the thing is that when you're in that situation, you're not moving forward. You're just existing in a kind of limbo in California. Then you said what you want to say, and the amount of new material you can produce diminishes each time. So remember David Shayler when he had defected from MI5, they were really about the first couple of weeks, because what's he going to say? Well, 4 years on, he said everything he could say, and he was, he wasn't really worth interviewing. No disrespect to David Shayler, because he said what he wanted to say, and there was nothing else he knew, and he was getting further and further away from what he did know, because he was outside and they were inside. And Harry's now further and further away from the royal family, so he can actually reveal limited.
Yeah, and it would have been fascinating, to be honest. As much as I do find them all a bit, entitled and whatever, they haven't really done anything in their lives. A lot of the royal family and stuff. It would be fascinating to see behind the curtain and have gotten a bit of that podcast series. But it looks like the only thing they're really interested in doing is sort of spouting a lot of woke stuff that will hopefully get them more popular with young people. Is that all it is?
Well, I think it's partly being so semi-vicious to the royal family, in Meghan's case, and some woke stuff from Harry. But I mean, I don't understand why he did, because this week he was saying to people, don't use towels more than you have to in hotels. What else was he saying? Don't use too much soap or something. Well, I mean, the reality is that the footprint that comes with travel, with airline travel, is worth about 10 million towels, probably, in terms of what you actually use and you clean it with. He was a man who took 4 jets within 10 days in 2019. 4 private jets in 10 days. His carbon footprint will be among the top 1% in the world. So he's not the person to lecture us, is he, about climate change?
Do as I say, not as I do. It's actually outrageous. One of the few things that actually winds me up. It winds me up more than wars for some reason, which probably says more about me than anything else. But it does wind me up. And also, someone's put in the comments, look at this. Andrew, I can't stand him. He's got no personality. Bloody hell. Look at that. Can you believe that? What do you think of that?
Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew,
You're talking
perhaps.
about me?
No, Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew.
Say something horrible about Norman, will you all? Because it can't just be me. I'm not having it. Oh, God. So, Queen's Platinum Jubilee Tour. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is that the Queen has effectively given up. She's either not able to carry on or she's got fed up with it. And who can blame her, to be honest with you? She's 96. Why should she keep trooping around? Why would she want to come to Parliament and read out a lot of guff written by Boris Johnson? I'm not going to do that, would you? So she delegated that to Charles. And, and she's clearly not... I don't think she's very well. I mean, we've talked about this so-called mobility issues. I mean, the message inside the palace is it's not just that. It's a lot more serious. So I don't want to be kind of gruesome about it, but I don't think she's going to last very long.
It's quite sad, isn't it? I remember when I was working at a tabloid newspaper back in the day, this was 10 years ago, we already had her obituary written up.
Yes. Well, I mean, if I can... Thank you very much. I do need earphones, John. I think if I've already actually recorded, if I can reveal this, for television programs to go out after she's died, which is a bit morbid, but they have to get things right.
Oh, who's that for? You can't say.
No, I don't think I ought to say, no. Not the BBC, who are frightened to death about doing anything with me on the royal family. It was last on the Today programme, and I was making a point about Prince Charles not paying his taxes properly. And the interviewer, Simon, whoever his name is, put the Prince Charles point of view to me, which is fair enough. I didn't mind that. It was a sensible interview. I gave my view. He put the Prince Charles point of view to me. Anyway, an Aaron's house, or St. James's Palace, actually, rang up particularly about this interview and demanded the BBC put out an apology. Said the BBC's lost. They caved in and have not been on the BBC since about the royal family. So, they got a backbone like a chocolate eclair, these people, BBC.
Oh my word! I'm actually done with them, to be honest. I can't be bothered with the BBC. Well, look at us, angry men, Norman, angry men. But going back, so we can't say who that is. You'll be doing. So obviously it's Channel 5, isn't it?
I just said I'm not telling you.
Just trying to catch you out. Right. What does it mean for the taxpayer? All this Queen's Platinum Jubilee tour.
I mean, that's not going to cost a huge amount as compared to what's going off in other ways. Take into account the £365 million being spent on Buckingham Palace money. Well, by the way, they complete the income from ticket sales as hers. The income's private, but the expenditure is public. It's a nice arrangement, isn't it? But then in this country, we have a royal mint and a national debt. That tells you all you need to know about the royal family. So the Platinum Jubilee is small compared to everything else they're doing.
Yeah, but what is? I mean, a lot of people do say, and I never seem to get hold of the actual statistics on this. A lot of people say, well, they bring in a lot of money through tourism or something like that. Is there much to that?
Do you know the royal palace in Europe with the most visitors? It's at Palace of Versailles in France, and the French got rid of their monarchy in 1848. So, we could actually get more visitors into Buckingham Palace if the royals weren't there. So, no, I don't think, Anyway, do we want to base our constitutional arrangements on what tourists want? Is that how we organise our constitution? We can't do this because tourists don't like it. Hey, come on.
Yeah, that's funny. I've never heard anyone once. I mean, I lived abroad for years, and people were always saying, "Oh, I want to go and see England. I want to visit England." I never heard anyone going because I must go and see the royal family and Buckingham Palace. It's just not. Buckingham Palace, of course, is one of the top attractions, but it's not what makes someone come to London. I'd be very surprised.
No.
Did you see Charles on that? Oh, go on. Sorry.
Well, Buckingham Palace will be there, even the royal family's not there. Buckingham Palace is still there, and they get more access to it if the royal family wasn't in it. So, but Buckingham Palace is not, I don't think, a particularly attractive building.
It's
But hey.
well, it's got a nice road outside of it, doesn't it? It's got a nice street and everything. But I think that's a really good point. Get rid of them. We can get in there then and have a bloody look around. Thanks, Chase Hughes. I'm very excited that you got to catch a live. By the way, thank you for the thing that you gave to Sean's thing. Go on, Norman. What were you going to say?
You were going to ask me about Charles, or say something about Charles.
Because he was in a gold throne shouting about poverty today or the other day, wasn't he?
Yeah, like the Queen's broadcast a couple of years ago when she was in the room surrounded by gold. Do you remember that? Very unwise. But to think about Charles, I was looking at today when he was on that picture of him in the Queen's speech, so-called Boris Johnson speech. My government will do this, that, and the other. He was festooned with medals, and what's he did? He was weighed down by them. He would probably need a couple of people to bring a stretcher to carry him with all these medals on, weighing him down. And what he did was captain a coastal mine 40 years ago.
It's actually disgusting, isn't it? It's a status thing. It's like, and how much do you need? You've grown up with that much wealth. I think I would just disappear. I've got all the status that I need. At the same time, if you've got a gold chair, it's almost more wasteful. I get that it's not, people are going, you're telling us about inequality, you're sat there in a gold chair. But if he chose not to use the gold chair, it's almost worse, because it's like, I've got a gold chair, I don't even need it.
Well, he could have cut the gold chair is not his, actually, in the sense that it was Lord, but he could have come along in a pursuit. Why'd you got to come along with a kind of naval costume on and weighed down by medals? All that about, and a sword. Why don't you just come in a normal suit and a tie?
Yeah. But is there not some argument of, don't we need some regality? Is regality a word? Don't we need some sort of celebration and excitement and these stupid... If they're not going to wear extravagant, ridiculous costumes, the royal family, then who is?
Well, that's probably true. Look, if people want to enjoy themselves on the platform, good luck to them, And if people think the Queen's done an okay job, which she probably has, then good luck to her. I don't begrudge people enjoying themselves. What family is that the attention is either in a kind of soap opera way. Who's falling out with whom, who's talking to so and so, all this sort of stuff. It's actually irrelevant. What's relevant is what role they play in our country. It cost us. And what example they set. It's more relevant. For example, they send all their kids to private hospitals. That's actually more of an issue for me than whether someone's got pink lipstick on or not.
That's a very fair point. Tell me a bit about Prince Charles's relationship now with Prince Harry, the son that got away.
Well, we believe the papers, and we can't always believe the papers, then it's pretty frosty. Because Harry has been slagging off the royal family, slagging them off in their quiet. He's been asking you down to me, apparently. And also, he doesn't seem to want to keep secrets. I mean, they have conversations over the phone. And, Charles is very careful what he says on the phone. Meghan is taping it. So, they have a very difficult relationship. I mean, it's a sad thing in a way, but that's how it is.
Yeah, it is a weird one, isn't it? You never know. Oh, my word. Imagine that with your own parents. Although there is something a bit, you do get the feeling a little bit like they don't feel, and this is probably maybe unfair, but they don't seem to feel paternal, maternal love in the same way that many of us do. Is that a fair observation?
No, it is a fair observation, because if you look back, in particular, it may be different with William and Kate, I don't know. And it may be different indeed with Harry, but go back a generation and you'll find that the kids were taken care of by nannies and the parents were not always there. And when Charles or Anne, I think it was, went into hospital when they were very young kids, it was a nanny who went with them, not their mum. Charles didn't see his father for his first 5 birthdays because Philip was out of the country. So it's a very peculiar upbringing. And then Charles got packed off to Gordonston, which is a horrible place up in the north of Scotland. I mean, horrible in the sense that Charles was a delicate thinking child, and he got sent to this kind of kind of boot camp place because Philip thought he should be toughened up. Probably wrecked the guy for life. So, I mean, they weren't really, in my view, brought up in a normal way. And that's reflected probably in how they behave now.
Yeah, and we sort of enable them to an extent by watching them and celebrating them. Really, these people need a good psychiatrist, which I guess was gotten at in that film, The King's Speech. I know that was quite a few decades ago. Do any of these people see therapists nowadays? They're just a bit odd, aren't they? They need to be better socialized.
Well, I don't know if they see therapists or not. I mean, who knows? I mean, if you go back to, you're coming on to Jimmy Savile, but if you look at Charles's friends over the years, I mean, he's had a very poor choice of friends. And, I'm not accusing Charles of having the same faults as people he's known, because I don't think he has. But nevertheless, he's chosen some weird people around him. So at the very least, he's got bad judgment.
Yeah. And then, like I was saying before, we go back to now, Meghan and Harry. And I've just been reading that they are now planning to go to Amazon and other places. Have you heard this? To get their cartoon series out?
Well, I haven't, but I'm not surprised, to be honest with you. No doubt they'll be taking a private jet there.
Like exactly. The cartoon it says like many girls. Oh, what is it? Sorry, it's Pearl. It's an animated series that centers on the heroic adventures of a 12-year-old girl who is inspired by influential women from history. The Duchess of Sussex will serve as an executive producer. Like what? What? And David Furnish, Elton John's husband, is going to be. He's an executive producer. I just think, what experience does she have to be, making this kind of thing? It just winds me up.
Well,
wound up, Norman.
Executive producer can be, as you'll know, Andrew, can be nothing. It can be just a name on the bottom of the script.
Yeah, which in itself is just ridiculous anyway. So, well, fair enough. What else is going on at the moment? Have you got what are you thinking about, Norman, with regards to the royal family and anything else?
Well, I mean, I think it's important that there's discussions taken in public, ideally, and indeed involving MPs about the financial arrangements which take place after the Queen goes. Because what will happen when the Queen dies is there'll be an outpouring of sympathy and support for her, and by definition for the royal family at the same time. Charles has got the first 10 days planned to go and, wow the country, wandering around the country with his visits to his, Wales and Scotland, where else. And while all that's going on, the financial settlement for his reign will be decided between the palace and the treasury. And if we're not careful, what will happen is, under the, kind of all the kind of outpouring of support for the Queen, underneath all that, there'll be a pretty terrible financial settlement sorted between Charles and the government to our detriment. And by the time we find out, it'll be too late. So I think it's quite important that we ask those questions now to make sure we don't get ripped off even more when Charles takes over. Because Charles, let's be clear about it, Charles is quite mercenary. He's quite determined to get as much as he can from the public purse and pay as little back as possible. I'm sorry to say that, but that actually is how he is.
Which is very sad. And I wonder, is there a way of voting out? How do we vote with our feet, so to speak, to get them out if we want it, if we so wanted?
If we could have voted them out, Prince Andrew would have been out years ago. We can't vote them out. They are unsackable. There was an opinion poll a while back. It's in my book, actually. Quick plug for my book. Asked the public who they thought should benefit from the public purse, and the only people who came with the majority, I think, rightly in my view, were the Queen and Charles. I think William was quite near, so the public understand people in the royal family and those who aren't. There was a whole lot of people down the bottom of the list who, in parliamentary terms, would have lost a deposit registered for election. 3 or 4% only supporting them. Well, they still get the money and they're still unsackable. Which is not a very good situation to be in. So we cannot sack people who are useless in the royal family. They are there. It's the hereditary principle. Sometimes you get someone who's quite good. Sometimes you get someone who's terrible. You get someone like George V, who was very diligent, but boring. You get someone like Victoria, who was actually slightly more careful with public money. And you get the present Queen, who I think is, in a way, in her own terms, done her best for the country. You get Edward VIII, who was basically a Nazi sympathizer. You don't get to choose who is there. You get who's next in line. And once you change who's next in line, people say, let's go on to William. Once you change who's next in line, then the whole hereditary principle goes out the window.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ash, for putting my book link there.
Oh, yeah. Chat. Do go get Norman's book. Where should I follow you on Twitter and all that as well?
Oh, I'm not on Twitter, but I've got a Facebook page. But I'm not very technically advanced. I've still got a wind-up telephone and kind of dial telephone and
a
1971 car.
I believe you.
I've got a lovely 1971 car.
Well, it sounds
Triumph Herald convertible.
God, it's going to be as old as the Queen. Well, it won't actually be anywhere near as old as the Queen. But thank you, Norman. As usual, you've been a star. Thank you for coming on and have a lovely day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hello, mate, in your jumpsuit.
My Steeples orange. All right, I just want to give everyone a huge thank you for joining us for Attwood Unleashed today. I think we had almost 1,000 on the stream at one point. Absolutely fantastic. Good to see the momentum picking up after our terminations and shadow bannings and hackings and Bitcoin scamming, live stream hackers and everything else. Anyway, we are back on track. Yes. So thank you. Thank you everyone who tuned in for Untouchable. If you've not seen it yet, check it out on YouTube or check out the Rumble version that's got some David I in it. Coming up Sunday, we know you all like that cult stuff. So the podcast on Sunday is called Jehovah's Witnesses Apostates Tragic Family Story. It is a story that has never been told before. It is the story of Jason Thickpenny, and it's coming out at 6 p.m. on Sunday on the YouTube channel for anybody to watch it there. So please enjoy that one. It's heartbreaking. He breaks down crying. You can see the trailer if you go over to the channel. And yeah, it's very moving. And it's a fascinating insight into the Jehovah's Witnesses and their rules, their regulations, how people get shunned if they do this and they do that, and the elders and what the elders get up to. And yeah, it's a completely different world. It's mind-blowing. Then on Monday night, we have got a woman who was in prison in the UK for holding weapons for London gangs, the Mendham. So Tawana's podcast is coming out at 6 p.m. on Monday. Then we've got Attwood Unleashed on Wednesday, and we're going to have a cluster of podcasts coming out because I've looked at what's in not been published yet. We've got almost 20 podcasts unpublished that we've recorded. And then on Monday, I'm with Michael Francis. Yep, he's coming to the UK. He's in the UK. He's here for the weekend, then he's coming back. He's going on tour. We're helping him publicise his tour. So I will be hosting the Liverpool and Manchester events in August with Michael Francis. Perhaps the second most famous mafia figure presently alive today through YouTube, etc. after Sammy the Bull. And it's going to be a real privilege to meet him after I've known him for a couple of years and do a podcast with him on Monday. So that's going to be massive. Huge thank you to Andrew. Please go down in the description box. All our videos now have all of Andrew's links. If you want to check out what Andrew is up to, who he's interviewing, what he's doing on his own platform.
Mostly talking to you, mate.
Not enough.
I do now get, just if you guys want backstage information, I get regular voice and video messages from Sean throughout the day. Look, he's even got my name on at the moment underneath his face.
Doppelganger. Put a 1 in the chat if you feel that Andrew outdid himself today on his royal rants and you would like to see more of that. Put a 2 in the chat if you wish Andrew would just keep his trap shut.
Oh, don't, mate. I've had a couple of people I've had a couple of trolls in the thing. One person was saying, I don't look at the camera enough. They're going, oh, he's just doing admin. What do they think I'm doing? My taxes.
It's hard. I'm trying to look at the camera. I'm trying to look at the guest on the screen. I'm trying to look at the chat. I'm trying to moderate the comments. Your eyes are like it is. You have to be multi.
I've got one eye up there.
Like,
Doing that.
yeah. They all want you to do more royal rants, Andrew. It's
Okay.
unanimous.
Oh, Nosferatu put a 12. That is so
That's
typical
12
Nosferatu.
ones. That's 12 is 12 times 1.
I appreciate the support, guys. After I saw that, I started just looking at the camera the whole time. I didn't see any more comments. I was just like, yeah, tell me more, Norman.
Yeah,
You know.
once you get on a rant, you do just look at the camera when you're on a rant, and it's like.
And another thing, Sean. Your show is. I'm tired of it.
We're supposed to be on Patreon right now. We've overstayed our welcome. So if you want to join us on Patreon, link is in the description box below this video. And if you didn't hear earlier on what we've got coming on Patreon, we're going really macabre. We've got JC from Wrong to Strong first, who was in prison in Mexico. Dark, but not as dark as it's going to get. Then we've got Chris from the O.J. Simpson alleged murder accomplice. Dark, but not as dark as Jesse. And how do we pronounce Jesse's last name, Andrew?
Zbota.
Who's going to be looking at the Luciferian Brotherhood structure, the occult in government and military, the Masons, crimes against kids, and cannibalism. All right, there you go. And then we've got Jason Luov, who's going to be talking also about more macabre stuff.
Chaos magic.
Including chaos magic. All right, let's go, because we've got a 5-minute break before we get on Patreon. If you want to join us there, love to see you there. And thanks, Patreons, for supporting what we're doing, because it really keeps us enabling this great content to come out. And huge thanks to Ash and everyone who's joined us tonight. Thanks to Ash for organising this. And next week, Ash has just given me a heads up on what's coming next week. I don't think I'm allowed to say, but it's going to be dynamite. It's going to be dynamite. From the inner mind to the outer limits.
Try and end the stream while dancing. We don't know what you'll be doing. You have to do either your elbows or another extremity. Sean.
Take me
Do it with
away.
your elbow.
Take me away.